every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's 3 p.m. and you are live with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, and I am bang up for it today. Ladies and gentlemen, this hour, have the police completely cocked up the search for Nicola Bulley? They had information about her issues with drinking and the menopause, but deliberately didn't share it with dive teams who were actually looking for her. They wanted to protect Nicola and her family, but have they ended up throwing them all and the public under the bus? Here's our big discussion today, though, people. Is it time to bring back national service? News today is that we're being outgunned by the French, for goodness sake. US troops are laughing at us. We're giving all our resources to Ukraine. We've got a load of soft, unpatriotic, young, woke weaklings, kids burning our country's flag at school, and rampant knife crime. National service would give the young, unemployed, and even potentially criminal kids purpose and make them proud to be British. We'll be chatting all about that. And Australia wants to pinch our doctors, our nurses, our police officers, our teachers. You know what this is, though? It's an advert for turning the boats back in the channel and having a strong points-based immigration system so you can pick and choose who comes into your country and make sure that they've got talent, a good work ethic, and that they will contribute. And I think I might have discovered the real reason that Nicola Sturgeon resigned yesterday. I think there could be a massive scandal brewing. I'll reveal all later in the show, so stay tuned for that. The question for you today is on national service. We've got a poll running on this now at GB News on Twitter. Get on that and vote in it. Would you bring back national service? GB Views at gbnews.uk. But right now, here's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB Newsroom, and we'll start with some breaking news in the last hour. The family of missing Nicola Bulley says the public focus has become distracted from finding her and is more concerned about speculation into her private life. Detectives have revealed the 45-year-old was vulnerable and that she struggled with alcohol and the menopause. Lancashire Police is facing backlash for disclosing such personal information about the mother of two who disappeared almost 3 weeks ago. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has made contact with the force to determine if an inquiry is needed. The search for a new First Minister of Scotland is underway after Nicola Sturgeon announced her unexpected decision to stand down. She plans to remain in office until her successor is elected. The SNP's Executive Committee will meet this evening to draw up a timetable for the leadership race. Possible replacements include the Deputy First Minister John Swinney and Finance Secretary Kate Forbes. The government has announced an extra £421 million to boost alcohol and drug treatment. The new funding will be given to 151 councils in England to recruit more staff, improve recovery support for prison leavers and invest in addiction treatment. Ministers say the plans could prevent nearly 1,000 drug-related deaths every year. The Undersecretary for Primary Care and Public Health, Neil O'Brien, says it will also help to cut crime.
We know that drug addiction drives so much crime. It drives about half of all crime. And because we know that if people get into drug treatment, that radically reduces their likelihood that they will be out there causing chaos and causing crime. And so we're making this big investment that will mean more people in treatment, new types of treatment. And as well as being good for all the rest of us and cutting crime, of course it's a path out of terrible, terrible addiction for people who are trapped in it.
Labour says they'll recruit an extra 13,000 community police officers to tackle antisocial behaviour and violent crime if they win the next election. The Shadow Home Secretary unveiled plans for a neighbourhood policing guarantee, assigning officers and PCSOs to every community. The Home Office claimed their proposed investment is a tenth of what the government is currently delivering, but Yvette Cooper criticised the Conservatives for their hands-off approach, claiming not enough is being done.
So I want to talk today about what's been a complete collapse in Home Office leadership on crime and policing under the Conservatives, how they've stood back while neighbourhood policing has crumbled, while the charge rate has plummeted, while confidence in policing and the criminal justice system have fallen, while more victims are being let down and more criminals are getting off.
The UK has now provided military training to 10,000 Ukrainian volunteer soldiers, with that number set to reach 30,000 by the end of this year. The Ministry of Defence has been teaching civilian recruits a range of skills, including urban fighting, weapons handling and dealing with explosives. Dubbed Operation Interflex, the 5-week programme takes place here in the UK and is similar to the type of training undertaken by British Army Reserves. It's hoped that it will help the fight back against Russia's invasion. The number of people who've died following major earthquakes that struck southern Turkey and northern Syria has surpassed 42,000. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Authority says more than 4,300 aftershocks have hit the country since the initial quakes. 11 days on, a few are still being rescued alive, and in some places, the focus is moving away from rescue efforts and towards clearing the rubble and rebuilding. Energy firm Centrica, the owner of British Gas, has posted profits of £3.3 billion, more than triple what it made the year before. But British Gas actually saw profits decrease by almost 40%. It comes after Ofgem launched an urgent inquiry to investigate Centrica for installing prepayment meters by force in vulnerable customers' homes. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has urged the government to implement what he called a proper windfall tax. Meanwhile, 1 in 3 small businesses might not be able to cover their energy bills from April when the price guarantee rises. It's expected to increase by 20%, and at the same time, government will phase down its support. New research by Experian has found 30% of the 1.2 million small businesses it analysed will be at heightened risk of collapse. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Starting with absolutely massive questions about missing Nicola Bulley today, ladies and gentlemen. Have the police completely bungled their investigation? But a plea from the family of the missing mum this afternoon as they urge to focus on basically finding her and not making up wild theories about her personal life. But there's more to get stuck into than meets the eye here, because Lancashire Police gave the public unexpected access into Nicola's private life when they disclosed that she'd experienced some issues with alcohol in the past, brought on, they say, by struggles with the menopause. Now, they've been criticised for revealing these details and revealing them to the public. The police have defended the decision to do so, saying it was important to clarify what it meant by the vulnerabilities that they mentioned in the press conference yesterday. A lot of people, though, including the independent dive lead who was tasked with looking for Nicola, said if they'd have at least told him about it, he would have changed the way he was looking for her. So have the police essentially done the worst of both worlds here? They've not released the information when it mattered most during the initial level of the search to the people who mattered most, i.e. those doing the searching, but now they've lobbed it out there to the public after the event. And I can't help but worry that that, frankly, has had a negative impact. Joining us now is GB News' North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show with the very latest on this. And the family actually have spoken out, haven't they?
They have indeed. I mean, this case just continues change and change. Since the last time I spoke to you yesterday, Patrick, since that press conference where we learned for the first time about those vulnerabilities that made Nicola a high-risk missing person, you mentioned that originally they wouldn't tell us what those vulnerabilities were, but now they've revealed that to the public yesterday evening. They say that she had had previous issues with alcohol brought on by the menopause. Now, that has been widely criticised for Lancashire Police releasing that information to the public. And in the last hour or so, we have heard from Nicola's family via Lancashire Police's Twitter. I've got a little bit of what they said here. It has now been 3 weeks since Nikki went missing. We as a family believe that the public focus has become distracted from finding Nikki and more about speculation and rumours into her private life. As a family, we were aware that Lancashire Police last night released a statement with some personal details. Although we know Nikki would not have wanted this, there are people out there threatening to sell stories about her. This is appalling and needs to stop. Now, in that statement, they also talked about the fact that Nicola was suffering with the effects of perimenopause, so things like brain fog and restless sleep. As a result, she was taking HRT medication, although they believe she'd stopped taking that, and although that she believed that may have been helping her, in fact, they say it may have ended up causing this crisis. Now, even more recently than that update from Nicola's family, we've heard from the Independent Office for Police Conduct, who have now reached out to Lancashire Police. They've said in a statement, following information that was made public by Lancashire Constabulary yesterday, we've made contact with the force to determine if a referral to the IOPC may be required. Of course, that is very private information about Nicola Bulley and her family that they have shared with the public. But the biggest question in all of this remains to be, what has happened to the mother of two?
Yeah, indeed. Look, Sophie, thank you very, very much. I know you've been all over this for us from the start, bringing us all the updates. So thank you, Sophie Reaper there, who's at the scene. Now, look, as you just heard there, the Independent Office for Police Conduct has within the hour said that they've made contact with Lancashire Police over information made public in a press conference about Nicola Bulley's private life. Just to fill you in, OK? So the police were saying that they were always aware of specific vulnerabilities. That's why they jumped straight on this case and they went big on it in their initial attempts to find Nicola. But they didn't tell us what those vulnerabilities were. And then yesterday it emerged, didn't it, later on, that unfortunately Nicola appears to have had issues with alcohol and hormonal problems as well. But this has created what I think many are regarding as an absolute hot mess, because they did not share that information with some of the people who were tasked with looking for her, so people who should have known that. They've then longed it out. That leads to massive press speculation. It leads to people in her private life and her personal life as well, allegedly, potentially trying to sell stories about her. And then here we are today, where the public, you, me, everyone, now knows, needlessly, some would say, intimate personal information about poor Nicola that wasn't shared with the very people who were supposed to be looking for her. To be honest with you, does anyone else feel as though the police might have thrown Nicola and her family under the bus here, thrown them to the wolves, certainly, and, frankly, maybe be covering their backs? Joining me now is Martin Underhill, who's a former police and crime commissioner and senior lecturer in psychology. Martin, thank you very much. This case keeps getting stranger. Have the police absolutely bungled this?
You would be forgiven for thinking so, Patrick. Thank you for having me on the show. The problem you've got here is that some really private, confidential health information has been disclosed by the police. And in doing that, they have created a completely different line of inquiry for the media and for the public, which is distracting, actually, from what the public want, which is to find Nicola, the mother of two children. So they've, again, in my view, scored an own goal. And that own goal is distracting everybody because it's an ethical debate now. I mean, why do we need to know that Nicola was going through the menopause? Every woman on this planet goes through the menopause. It's just unbelievable.
I would argue, though, Martin, so it's important to say now that the family have come out and said, well, they gave the police permission to do this now, but the reason, of course, is because there's been massive press scrutiny and massive public scrutiny into the ins and outs of it. Look, we can argue about that all day long, but I would have thought anyway, think that the people who should have known are maybe not you and me, maybe not Joe Bloggs down the pub, but actually the people who were diving, looking, and even the head of that independent dive team has said it would have changed the way he approached that search. There would be more chance of having found Nicola if he'd have known that, and that seems unforgivable.
Well, again, we have to go back to how did the dive team end up being searching the River Wire, because it appears that the family asked for help rather than the police, and therefore the police, you could argue, didn't have to brief the search team. But you're absolutely right. What they've done by releasing that information yesterday, which is completely unprecedented, to my knowledge, of a missing person case like this, is one, they've destroyed her reputation at the stroke of a pen. Secondly, they have started a huge debate about whether a woman with menopause, basically we're blaming victim blaming here. And that has distracted everybody from the key issue. So, yes, if Paul, the diver, had been told about this information, it would have changed his tactics, because he was looking for someone who the police had said fell in the river. The strong suggestion from the details released yesterday is that she might have jumped in the river, and that completely changes your underwater search tactics. So I do get the point about the dive team. The police would say we didn't invite them in, the family did, and we're not obliged to disclose information. But you've already hit the nail on the head. This information, if it had been released in the first day of Nicola going missing, would have completely changed the dialogue, the coverage, and the perception of this case. And why they've done it 3 weeks later, I have no idea. All it's done, as you said, good expression, they've thrown Nicola and her family under the bus, they've destroyed her reputation, and started a national debate about the menopause, which is not helpful when we're trying to find the mother of 2 children.
No, exactly. And you know what it looks like? For me, anyway, and maybe this is unfair. We've gone to Lancashire Police for a comment. We're waiting to hear back on this, and maybe this is unfair, but I can only give my honest opinion about what this looks like from me, is that there was a bit of a ham-fisted approach initially, there wasn't coordination, and what have we had in the last 2 days? We've had them throwing the public under the bus, going, oh, you were giving us a load of duff information. Well, I'm sorry, but there was a massive appeal for information, and you're always going to get sickos and weirdos out there in any case like this. And one would imagine the police would just have to deal with that. And then on top of that now, you've got Nicola, her personal reputation being thrown under the bus. This, to me, looks as though the police are absolutely bricking it and thinking, what can we do to swerve our initial mistakes here? Your takes on that?
Well, by victim blaming her, they are almost protecting their own reputation, and that's already been said in the last 24 hours. As I keep saying, the last time I spoke to you, I said this, the Lancashire Police are doing things that are not normal in cases like this. We keep going into rabbit holes that I've never seen before. I mean, as you said in your opening speech, we went 8 days without a press conference, which left a huge void. So your TikTok detectives, your armchair detectives filled that void because the police weren't there telling the public what they wanted to know. And then when they do come out and do a press conference, they completely throw a swerve ball, such as she's vulnerable. Well, if they'd left it there, that would have been fine. They could have said she suffered from depression. That isn't throwing her under the bus. It's a medical fact. But by actually going into massive details about drink abuse, alcohol abuse and the menopause, I don't understand what they're trying to achieve. It doesn't help this inquiry move forward. It destroys Nicola's reputation and I imagine has alienated the family.
Yeah, indeed. Look, thank you very much, Martin, for that, and we do appreciate your insights. Martin Underhill there is former police crime commissioner and senior lecturer in psychology. When you look at that, what Martin was just saying there, no press conference for 8 days, despite this absolutely massive search in a particular stretch of the river, which, of course, alerts everyone and makes everyone think that this is an incredibly mysterious case, which it's turned out to be. The press conferences then went on, well, we've got a 10-minute window. She was wearing a Fitbit. Well, it's turned out now that Fitbit wasn't synced, and the 10-minute window could be as wide as 2 hours. We've also then, on top of that, got, well, she's got specific vulnerabilities. We're not sharing information with an independent dive team that the family has had to go and try and get involved themselves because they're desperate to find Nicola, of course. Well, now it's turned out, OK, well, under pressure, after a press conference yesterday, they've accidentally said, oh, she's got these vulnerabilities. Then they have to come out and say, OK, well, you know what? She's got problems with drink and also revealed quite personal, very personal hormonal situation. Both of those things are incredibly personal pieces of information that clearly the family initially did not want out there. The police have made a right horlicks of this. some would say. We've gone to the police force, we're yet to hear back, and it is important to say that we have actually gone to them to respond to some of this criticism. But there we go. Loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts initially on the way the police have handled this case. And actually, I've just got two in front of me here that sum up, I think, where people are on this. I get there's a range of views. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Don says it's unbelievable the police are being blamed for not finding Nicola. He's saying that basically we shouldn't be saying that they've botched the investigation, the full story will gradually come out. Yeah, OK, I'm sympathetic to that view. But then we've also got No Name on this one, calling for there to be massive inquiries. It looks like there might well be an inquiry, saying there could be actual sackings here. If it was a private company, then heads would have rolled, etc., etc. So, yes, very, very split views on all of this. Trish says that it's a disgrace, this investigation, and that there should be resignations. It is just such a strange handling of this case. As Ryan also points out, I've got time for one or two more emails here. Ryan says the handling of this case and media management is atrocious, considering the public perception of the police after such failings by other forces. Is it any wonder, therefore, that the public take it upon themselves to try to solve what looks like another mishandled case? And that is a very good point, I think. We've rattled off a catalogue of police failures dating back for a very, very long time. I mean, you only have to look back at the grooming gang scandals, for example. People have massive scepticism when it comes to the police's ability, especially local forces' abilities, to handle big cases. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, the media management. And yesterday sums that right up. You go on about having specific vulnerabilities, and then you blame people like me for asking what those vulnerabilities are, and then it all comes out, and then the family have to release a statement. It's an absolute horror show, this, completely from start to finish. One more now. Karen says, just a thought to how Nicola would feel if and when she is found. Yes, her family said it was OK for the police to reveal this information, but what would she want? Yeah, and I must say I thought that. I thought if Nicola is out there somewhere, and we all hope that she's safe and well, what would she be thinking, knowing that this stuff is out there now? I think it's an absolute catastrophe. But we're going to be dealing with this throughout the course of the show because it is a massive story. And frankly, the way things have gone the last few days as well, there's every chance we'll get an update on the Nicola Bulley case throughout the course of this show. So stay tuned. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And coming up now, as many of you are struggling with your energy bills, now one company has tripled its profits in the last 12 months. Find out exactly just how much they're raking in. And our big one, which we're going to be doing a little bit later on, do you think it's time to bring back national service? Supposedly, the French military, yeah, I know, the French military, they're laughing at us. The Americans, they're laughing at us. We're sending all our resources to Ukraine. We've got people stabbing themselves to death in record numbers on the streets of Britain. Is it time that we sorted out this country, get national service back involved and sort out a woke generation, or people who are unemployed maybe as well and a little bit delinquent? I want to know whether or not you think we should bring back national service. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Back in a tick.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The French military are laughing at us. Yes, you heard that correctly. As well as the Americans, apparently, we're sending a lot of resources to Ukraine. Meanwhile, here at home, we've got school pupils who burn the Union flag outside their school. We've got people taking the knee left, right and centre, woke education, snowflake generation, all of this stuff. Is it time to bring back national service? Would it sort out our military? Would it help reduce crime rates? And frankly, would it put a little bit of patriotism, a shot of patriotism into the heart of a younger generation? We're going to be talking about this very shortly. Get your views coming in. It's already kicked off in the inbox. A couple of former military personnel telling me no, absolutely not. They don't want weekend warriors, and I can understand that. But a lot of you saying, yes, it would sort out a disillusioned younger generation. So we'll get stuck right into that. But first, what would you say about a company that essentially broke into your house and fitted a more expensive piece of equipment, was charging you for it against your will, and then was recording record profits and supposedly their execs being paid absolutely loads of money? You'd probably have a thing or two to say about that, wouldn't you? Well, British gas owner Centrica reports soaring underlying annual profits of £2.8 billion. That's up from £392 million in 2021. I don't even know what £2.8 billion looks like written down, frankly. But despite thousands of households struggling with gas and electric bills, Centrica's boss, Chris O'Shea, is so far refusing to reveal whether he will waive his bonus. Joining us now is our economics and business editor, it's Liam Halligan with On the Money. I'm quite angry, Liam. Should I be?
It's important to distinguish, Patrick, between Centrica, which is the parent company, and British Gas, which is the customer-facing company that actually sells you the gas that you use to cook your baked beans and to heat your home. You're right in the sense that politically this is really heating up since these figures were released this morning. Let's just have a closer look at these figures. So Centrica, that's the parent company. Their operating profits in 2021, we can see on this graphic, were 948 million, and that went to 3,300 million, or 3.3 billion. A billion is 1,000 million in 2022, just so you know. And then the underlying profits, that strips out the profit that Centrica made from selling some of their businesses, Spirit Energy. They're slightly lower, but still massive. 392 million in 2021. 2,800 million or 2.8 billion in 2022. Why are they making so much money in 2022? Because Centrica actually drills stuff out of the ground. It's an upstream company. It drills oil and gas out of the ground, and of course wholesale prices for oil and gas have been going to the moon. But British Gas, the retail division, have a look at these numbers here in the final graphic. They made £118 million in 2021. And then they made £72 million in 2022. They made less money in 2022 than in 2021. Why? Because the companies that face you and do the direct debit thing every month, it's getting increasingly painful, I know, they're paying more for their wholesale gas, right? So they make less money. Also, we're using less gas. So if you think that British Gas made 72 million quid in 2022 and they've got 7.5 million households that are their customers, they made about a tenner per household. So you're right to be angry that Centrica is making so much money, and there are windfall taxes on these companies that drill in the North Sea. I mean, they pay 60, 70% tax on their profits under some definitions. And I do think there'll be more to come in the March budget, 15th of March, that will be in Jeremy Hunt's spring budget. But I don't think British Gas itself, for all the things it's done, and obviously there was a very interesting sting by the Times where a company contracted by British Gas was installing prepayment meters against customers' wills. Despite all that, I don't think British Gas itself can be accused of profiteering.
I mean, you just explained that really well there, basically, and in a way...
But you gave me a couple of minutes to do it. You need time to explain these things.
Yeah, exactly. But the optics of it, as you all know, in business and in life, frankly, it's also not just what's happening, it's how it looks.
Exactly.
And we've got people at the minute out there who'll be watching this who've maybe had their door, for want of a better phrase, kicked down by someone, a more expensive meter put in. They were already skint. Now they're double skint as a result of that. And they'll be reading things like this. There's some guy there who, I mean, goodness gracious, I mean, God only knows what his bonus is. And this just looks like a racket.
It does look like a racket, and, you know, it's not unusual for prepayment meters to be fitted where customers are judged to have a bad credit record. It's the fact that this is being done now when everybody is struggling to pay their bills, and, of course, at the wholesale end of the market, the upstream, you know, the oil and gas exploration end, the extraction end, people are making a huge amount of cash. So this is politically explosive. That's why the government put an extra windfall tax in place at the time of the last budget in March 2022, just after that invasion by in Ukraine by Vladimir Putin. That's when oil and gas prices started to spike upwards. So an oil company working in the North Sea, right? Most companies pay 19% corporation tax. Oil companies pay 30% corporation tax. Then they pay an extra 10% supplementary tax. And then as of last month, they pay an extra 35%, up from 25%, which is a supplementary tax. So it's up at about 70 or 75%. I mean, you get to the point where if you're taxing oil and gas exploration in the North Sea more than that, it's not going to happen.
Well, it's not, is it, really? And there has to be some incentive for them there. But I just feel sorry for the little guy, to be honest with you, in the person.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
He's really struggling.
And people on prepayment meters, you know, there's 13 million prepayment meters in Britain, right? This is not a small group of people. It's a lot of people, and they generally pay a lot more per unit for their electricity than those of us who have bank accounts and are on debt. I was almost going to say that who are lucky enough to be on direct debit, though we don't feel very lucky at the moment.
Doesn't feel lucky at the minute, no, Liam. Thank you very much. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. Now, Centrica's chief executive released this statement on the preliminary results. He says, we've invested £75 million in supporting our energy customers in 2022, which was greater than the £8 post-tax profit per customer earned by British Gas Energy. Whilst customers may see some relief given recent easing of prices, it remains clear that some will continue to need help, and we will do what we can to support them in the year ahead. But I tell you what, the idea that you might come home from work one day, OK, on a low-paid job, struggling to make ends meet, to find that the bolt on your door has been screwed off and you've got a prepayment meter in there. Meanwhile, there's some bloke living it up, sipping a pina colada in the Maldives, going, yeah, I won't tell you what my bonus is. It's absolutely shocking. You're with me, Patrick Christys, and coming up, this is the big one. The inbox has kicked right off as a result of this. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should we bring back national service? I think it'll sort out that woke brigade, OK? You could call them the woke brigade, actually. It's a valid argument for me if you believe that the French as well are laughing at us because they outgun us, which is remarkable, really, isn't it, considering everything, if history is anything to go by. And the Americans, they're laughing at us as well. What is going on with our armed forces? We seem to have all the resources in the world to give to the Ukrainians and not our own. Sort the woke generation out, get them in the military, but there we go. Also, as well, if you go around young offenders units, maybe some of them already know how to fire a gun. Moving on, I think I might have discovered the real reason Nicola Sturgeon resigned yesterday. And I think there could be a big scandal brewing, OK? So I'll reveal all very shortly. But right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 33 minutes past 3. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The family of missing Nicola Bulley says the public focus has become distracted from finding her and is more about speculation into her private life. Detectives have revealed the 45-year-old was vulnerable and that she struggled with alcohol and the menopause. Lancashire Police is facing backlash for disclosing such personal information about the mother of two who disappeared almost 3 weeks ago. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has made contact with the force to determine if an inquiry is needed. The government has announced an extra £421 million to boost alcohol and drug treatment. The new funding will be given to 151 councils in England to recruit more staff, improve recovery support for prison leavers and invest in addiction treatment. Ministers say the plans could prevent nearly 1,000 drug-related deaths every year. Labour says they'll recruit an extra 13,000 community police officers to tackle antisocial behaviour and violent crime if they win the next election. The Shadow Home Secretary unveiled plans for a neighbourhood policing guarantee, assigning officers and PCSOs to every community. The Home Office claim their proposed investment is a tenth of what the government is currently delivering. And the UK has now provided military training to 10,000 Ukrainian volunteer soldiers, with that number set to reach 30,000 by the end of this year. The Ministry of Defence has been teaching the civilian recruits a range of skills, including urban fighting, weapons handling and dealing with explosives. Dubbed Operation Interflex, the 5-week programme is similar to the type of training undertaken by British Army Reserves. And energy firm Centrica, the owner of British Gas, has posted profits of £3.3 billion, more than triple what it made the year before. But British Gas actually saw profits decrease by almost 40%. It comes after Ofgem launched an urgent inquiry to investigate the company for installing prepayment meters by force in vulnerable customers' homes. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Patrick will be back with you in just a moment.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
All All right, people, it's the big one. Does Britannia really rule the waves? Some people don't even want you to say that anymore, and that's, I think, part of the problem, isn't it, when it comes to where we are at militarily? A new report on the UK's armed forces would suggest that we don't rule the waves anymore, because the latest military balance assessment by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, which, can I just say, is one of the hardest things I've ever had to read off an auto cue, has found the UK has 50,000 fewer military personnel than the French. A senior fellow from the organisation said British combat forces were now very, very small and can't be in two places at once, which is a concern given the fact that we might be about to send them to two places at once. It follows reports that some of the UK's European counterparts are concerned about British military decline. Forgive me for saying they weren't so concerned about it a little bit earlier on in the previous century, were they? But responding to the story earlier this week, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said it was basically loads of an expletive beginning with B. So, there we go. We can't possibly repeat that on air, but that's his views, and now I can't get that word out of my head. Basically, we're having a discussion now about national service. And by national service, I don't mean forcing people to go to war for us, OK, unless it really kicks off. I mean, maybe getting them some basic military training early doors. Could it sort out the woke brigade? As I said earlier, you could actually call them the woke brigade. Would it instill a bit of patriotism into people's lives as well? Could it help deal with things like violent crime? Unemployment, maybe. Joining me now is a recipient of the Military Cross and a veterans campaigner. It's Trevor Colt, MC, and a retired British Army officer and military historian, Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley. Both of you, thank you very much. Trevor, I will start with you. Where do you stand on the idea of national service?
Under today's current... First of all, thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. So before I start off, I'll say that in today's current climate, we shouldn't be talking about national service. The reason we should be talking about why we're moving towards national service and why this is now an issue. Now, if we go back, and I'm trying to put the meat on this, and I'm sure the General will have more to say about this. But this stems back to many, many years ago when Sir Admiral Henry Leach brought this out to say that we were disarming our military and depleting it far too soon. In fact, 9 years before the end of the Cold War. And we started moving it. And it was also brought up by Anne Whittingham several years ago. What we currently have is our senior officers and retired generals. I'm not sure generals ever retire. They're always there. But members of the civil service did state in the past that our senior generals, you know, we weren't going to listen to them anymore. They were geriatrics. And these guys are the ones with all the knowledge and all the experience and the ones that lead our country in a safe environment. And they have been pushed to the side for civil servants that have now taken over. And the problem we have, Patrick, is that the Cabinet Office and the civil servants, along with the MOD, have deliberately undermined our armed forces by depleting them. Now, if we go now to finish this up before the General gets involved, John Bolton mentioned this several years ago, where he said that Germany wouldn't fully commit to NATO because they had already made plans for European defence. And that was the German Defence Minister, Ursula, who now is in charge of the European...
Well, she did. And Trevor, I'm glad you brought up Ursula von der Leyen, because the rumours are, well, it's been reported, that the German military had to train with broom handles instead of guns at one point under her, so the natural thing to do would be to let her be in charge of a continent, wouldn't it? That seems to be the barometer for political leadership at the moment. I'm going to bring in the retired British Army officer, Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley, on this one. What would be so wrong, OK, in the current crop where I'm seeing kids burning a Union flag outside a school and all absorbing all of this Marxist tosh that seems to be pumped into them and learning terrible things about this country? What would be so wrong about saying to kids, if you're 18 years old and you're not in education and you're not employed, go and do a year's military training? What would be wrong with that?
Hello, Patrick, and thanks for asking me on. And Trevor, it's nice to meet you. Look, I don't think we should conflate the issues of national service with that of the size of the armed forces. They're not necessarily the same thing. Now, is there a big issue with the size of the armed forces and their capabilities? Definitely. And sorry, Ben Wallace was talking nonsense, because he himself has been quoted recently as saying that the British Army is, and I quote, funded only for a bit of tootling around at home. And whose doing is that? It's his and his government's. And Trevor's quite right that since the Ministry of Defence was disemboweled as a strategic military headquarters and handed over to civil servants, we've gone from bad to worse. That aside, national service, well, in principle, yeah, what's wrong with doing something for a couple of years for your country? It doesn't have to be military service. Could be the lifeboats, could be a volunteer fireman, Meals on Wheels, you name it. There's actually nothing wrong with that. Some countries kept national service for longer than others, precisely for this business of forming the nation, and the Spanish were an obvious example. And other countries do it so that they can have a large standing army and a huge ready reserve, like the Russians. But does this actually produce results? Well, look at the battlefield performance of the Russian military. Actually, no, it doesn't, because the amount of training that can be absorbed in a short space of time is not very much. If you want to get people into military service, then perhaps the best thing is to encourage service in the reserve forces, which need to be greatly expanded. Their footprint needs to be made a lot bigger. They need to be locally accessible for people to do that. And actually go to any cadet force centre, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and you won't see this woke generation. You'll see some brilliant kids who love their country and are determined to do what they can for it.
God, this is it. We need a bit more of that. But also, Trevor, I'm looking out on the streets of Britain at the minute. Rampant drug dealing, rampant violent crime, disaffected young people. Could, a little bit of even military-style education, tough love, I don't know, being shouted at by a big hairy man in a suit for a little bit and being taught how to iron your shirt, could that sort you out a bit?
Patrick, of course it would. I think all young men should do a little bit of time in the armed forces. It would help them expand their knowledge, because quite clear at the minute that they're not really learning much at universities apart from how to protest. So a time in some sort of military boot camp, even a police boot camp or something along the lines where people actually add value to our nation would be fantastic for kids today. They've nothing to look up to. Let's get them off the internet. Let's get them off Fortnite and these stupid games, and let's teach them something and teach them respect.
Teach them respect. That's good. I'll go back to you, Jonathan, on this. I've got an idea for a recruitment drive, OK, and I want your views on it, all right? We have a picture of a French military personnel there just laughing, OK? And we say, the French are laughing at us. Surely people who are down the pub would go, I tell you what, I can't have that. And they'd be signing up at the enlistment offices in their droves, wouldn't they?
Well, I hope so. And actually, there's not too much wrong with the French military. They know how to fight. My life was saved by a French officer at one time, and I don't mind admitting it. And we've got plenty in common with them. But to be overtaken by them, how can that be acceptable at a time when, as Trevor rightly says, actually France, Germany, and others are trying to railroad Britain, and our civil service is helping them into EU military structures, which simply undermine NATO. And we should be concentrating on NATO, and we should be making our regular forces much more exciting and attractive as a full career. So let's get away from this wokery, get back to the notion that armed forces are for fighting, reward people properly, and add back all the capabilities that have been taken away and dumped in recent years, because that's why people are laughing at us. They're laughing at us because they don't think we can fight. And I'm sure that the people in the armed forces will give it their best shot, but they are not being given the tools and the training to do it.
Both of you, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Cheers for coming on. That is, of course, recipient of the Military Cross, Trevor Coles, Veterans campaigner as well, and, of course, British Army officer, military historian, Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley. Just reacting to this national service debate. Lots of strong views coming in on this either side. It's interesting, actually, how many veterans get in touch, and we do have a big veteran viewership and listenership, and very, very grateful for that as well. And quite a lot of you seem to be saying no to national service, and I can understand your logic, actually, because a lot of you are saying, well, actually, you know, it needs to be people who are volunteering to be there, so people who actually care, and that makes a massive difference. An individual here, I couldn't see the name, I think it's Neil, says, what drives us most in the military is the fear of failure. And I think what you're getting at there, Neil, is that if someone's told to be there, then they don't really care whether or not they're successful. I get that. There is a difference, I think, between what I'm suggesting with national service here and actually sending people out to the front line. So what Putin's doing now is rounding up people in prisons and a ragtag brigade of people, or someone gets a phone call one day and, sorry, your son's going off to fight an unwinnable war in Ukraine. That's not really what I'm talking about, and I hope World War III doesn't kick off, so we have to find out. But I think instilling a bit of discipline and instilling a bit of patriotism in a younger generation could be a good thing. Anne says, I've been banging on about this for years. Yes, bring back national service for both boys and girls. Well, you've opened up another can of worms here now, Anne, haven't you? Do we get the girls involved as well? Holly says, I'm not sure about national service. It's a bit like closing the door once the horse has bolted. We need to bring back discipline in schools, respect in society and responsibility in public office. And I'm pleased you've mentioned schools there. I do keep banging on about this school. It was in Pimlico, where pupils decided to burn the Union flag, and the headmaster just seemed absolutely fine about that. But what is going on in schools at the minute? You have inner-city schools, quite often in the London area, but every major city will have these, where gangs are rife, there's no discipline there. One school that I know of in London has an in-house police officer, which I think says it all. There's no respect there from the kids. And then when they go to history lessons, they're taught about the horrors of the empire and what a horrible, shoddy, racist little nation Britain is, as opposed to actually some of the good things that we've done. And it makes you wonder as well, then they're all there with the rainbow flag in the classroom. They're more likely to have a rainbow flag in the classroom than a Union flag. What is really the point of having national service now? It would be to try to sort all of that out. And I think, you know, you see these programmes, Channel 4 and Channel 5 used to do documentaries on this kind of stuff, where they'd get a load of people who were at young offenders units and plonk them in a military barracks for a month, and then they'd come out the other side of it and they'd be employable, they'd feel better about themselves, they'd be fitter as well. What's so bad about that? Paddy says, as a former soldier, I can say we don't want national service, at least not military service. People made to join the forces are worse than useless, so you pay lots of money for them and get very little in return. The Russians in Ukraine are a perfect example. Yeah, both sides of that debate, he's saying as well he doesn't want weekend worries. I understand it. I think for me there's a difference between sending them out to fight and actually just trying to, you know, boost a bit of patriotism and giving people a bit of purpose. Wouldn't it look good on a CV as well, you know? Instead of your ASBO and your community service order, you've got some national service there. What about that? Now, though, moving on, because with Nicola Sturgeon's dramatic exit yesterday, many are wondering why she chose to finally depart now. Here we go. And whilst the First Minister claimed she'd been thinking about this decision for a while, and the recent controversy over a gender reform bill, growing questions about the state of the party's finances, though, have fuelled speculation about the timing of her departure. And this is where I think we're at, people. I've got a feeling there's a big scandal brewing here and Nicola wanted out. Michael Blackley joins me now, political editor for the Scottish Daily Mail. Thank you very much, Michael. Great to have you on the show. So, there are issues surrounding the finances, aren't there, of the SNP, and interestingly involving Nicola Sturgeon's husband. And call me a sceptic, but I think she wanted out before all this came home to roost. Your views, your knowledge?
Well, there's certainly issues. So there's a police investigation at the moment into how £600,000 of funds that were raised for an independence campaign were actually spent. There were complaints about the role of Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Murrell, and what he approved that could be done with that money. So there's certainly a live police investigation which has been dragging on for some time. Who knows if the decision for Nicola Sturgeon to stand down has anything to do with that. However, what was pretty striking at the press conference yesterday was that when she faced a question about that issue, she was less reluctant to speak about that than any other question. She looked quite uncomfortable, as she indeed has been at every point at which she's been asked about any questions about the SNP's finances and about her husband's finances. And he also loaned the SNP £107,000 as well. And she's not looked too happy answering questions about that either.
But this is the point, isn't it? Because people in the media can ask her questions, as you've rightly pointed out, and political inquiries can ask her questions. She was ridiculed, lest we forget, for her unbelievable forgetfulness when it came to questions over Alex Salmond and the reasons behind his departure, etc. You know, I can't recall, relentlessly. She doesn't want to talk about this stuff, but if the police become involved, and it's important to say absolutely, yeah, nothing's proven, and that remains the case. But if the police become involved, at some point, she might really have to start remembering. And it's about the money that her husband has supposedly given the party, and it's about where that money has gone, and it's about what she knew about it, and it doesn't look great for her.
Yes, it's all pretty murky, the issues around the SNP's finances. Of course, Nicola Sturgeon would argue that she simply isn't commenting because there's a live police investigation and it would be inappropriate to do so. So we can't reach definite conclusions about what that means. But certainly there is something, there's a lot of questions about the SNP's finances, about how money has been spent, and about why we had this ridiculous situation where the chief executive, who happens to be her husband, had to put up so much money for a party. I mean, I can't imagine the circumstances in any other business where the chief executive has to effectively bail out his own employer. It seems like quite a strange situation there.
And just quickly, Michael, we're a bit pressed for time, but the line that Sturgeon appears to be sticking to at the minute is not going to comment, police investigation, etc. And it is really important to emphasise absolutely nothing has been proven or whatever yet. But it's really that it's her husband's own money and she doesn't seem to know too much about it, which for a lot of people will be sceptical about that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, so there was questions about this issue last week, and that was exactly the point that she made. So she made the point that this was Peter Murrell's own finances. She wasn't willing to be drawn on when she was asked whether any of her money went towards this, as would often be the case in a married couple. If one person uses their money, it's using some of each other's money. But she insisted that this was his personal finances. So she has at every stage distanced herself from the process of her husband giving the SNP a loan.
Yeah, watch this space, ladies and gentlemen. Michael, thank you very much. Michael Blackley there, political editor for the Scottish Daily Mail. It's a remarkable idea, isn't it, that someone that you are married to and have a very close relationship with would have such separate finances. But lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on national service. Chris says, totally agree with the introduction of national service for 18 months. He's put a time limit on it. Young people will have pride in their flag, a positive structure, fitness, and it will look good on their CV for future employment. And another one that keeps coming into me now is why don't we make people who want to come to this country and live in this country, why don't we maybe make them do some form of national service? I mean, I can see a world full of problems with that, to be perfectly honest with you. But on that, actually, that leads us nicely into the immigration discussion. And in the next hour, I'm going to be talking about this. Australia wants to pinch our nurses, it wants to pinch our doctors, it wants to pinch our police officers and our teachers. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they turned the boats back and they got complete control of their immigration system, which means they can now pick and choose the best of the best that they want to come and contribute towards their economy. And is that not an advert for a points-based immigration system? All of that coming your way. Find out why many people think, by the way, that the Lancashire Police have completely botched this investigation into Nicola Bulley, and much, much more coming your way.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Storm Otto, named by the Danish Weather Service, could cause some problems across parts of northern Britain on Friday morning, particularly Scotland and northern England. Here comes that storm system. Notice the isobars squeezing together. It's the winds that are likely to cause the issue, particularly through the early hours of Friday morning, and then during the morning the strongest winds will work a little further south. Back to the rest of today, and rain from that system will be moving in across Scotland. It's going to be a very wet night in western Scotland, but the rain light and patchy over northern England and Northern Ireland. Further south, most places will just stay dry and cloudy. It will turn windy here, but the strongest winds will be further north, and it's going to be a very mild night in the south, with many places staying in double figures. Let's look at those winds, though, first of all, because they increase through the early hours in western Scotland and then gets very gusty all morning across Scotland down into northern England. Gust of wind of 70, perhaps in some locations 75 miles an hour, likely to cause some disruption, certainly to the transport network. Planes flights may be delayed or cancelled, and there's likely to be some flying debris around, and certainly difficult driving conditions, especially for high-sided vehicles on some of the Transpennine routes. Plenty of sunny spells developing, but it will be blustery. Further south, quite cloudy, most places dry, a little bit of light rain in the southwest. But it will be a very mild day here, colder further north, especially with those winds, which will ease through the afternoon, much lighter winds as we head into the weekend. Some more wet weather pushing in. That will bring some snow to parts of Scotland, chiefly over hills. Mostly rain at low levels, but could see some for a time as we head into Saturday. And then Saturday is a mixed picture, really. A bit of patchy rain on the south coast. There'll be some rain for a time over southern Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland, but tending to fizzle out through the day. Some brighter spells elsewhere. Sunday sees more rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry for England and Wales.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back. It's 4 p.m. and you are live with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Lots to get through this hour. Let's get stuck in. Lancashire Police are coming under fire for their handling of the search for Nicola Bulley, this time for revealing intimate details about the mother of two. Now, this afternoon, her family said they knew the information would be released, but have they completely messed up this whole search now for the missing mum, and in the process potentially throwing her and the British public under the bus? We'll talk about all of that. The parent company of British Gas, Centrica, has recorded sky-high profits of £3.3 billion for 2022, despite the fact, of course, it was only a few weeks ago that British Gas was coming under fire for breaking into vulnerable customers' homes to install prepayment meters. People are going skin. They're not, I can tell you that much. Is it all justified? In our big debate today, it's all about getting on top of Generation Woke, the Woke Brigade, I'm calling them now in this instance, with some good old-fashioned national service. A new report has found that the UK's military is the laughingstock of Western powers, with over 50,000 fewer troops than the French. So, should we thrust young, unemployed, in some cases criminal kids onto, well, not the front line, but give them a bit of training, OK? Whip them into shape to knock the woke out of them and instill a little bit of national pride? I think possibly. Get in touch with your views. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Will you bring back national service? Tweet us as well. We've got a poll on the go at GB News. That poll is taking place there now. Would you bring back national service? Right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, as you've been hearing, the family of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, says the public focus has become distracted from actually finding her and is now more about speculation into her private life. Detectives have revealed the 45-year-old was vulnerable and that she struggled with alcohol and the menopause. Lancashire Police are now facing a backlash for disclosing such personal information about Nicola Bulley, who disappeared almost 3 weeks ago. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has made contact with the force to determine if an inquiry is needed. Labour says they'll recruit an extra 13,000 community police officers to tackle antisocial behaviour and violent crime if they win the next election. The Shadow Home Secretary unveiled plans for a neighbourhood policing guarantee, assigning officers and PCSOs to every community. Yvette Cooper is criticising the Conservatives for having a so-called hands-off approach to policing.
I want to talk today about what's been a complete collapse in Home Office leadership on crime and policing under the Conservatives, how they've stood back while neighbourhood policing has crumbled, while the charge rate has plummeted, while confidence in policing and the criminal justice system have fallen, while more victims are being let down and more criminals are getting off.
But the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, says the Conservatives are already investing more than Labour are pledging.
Well, Labour's plans aren't credible. In fact, they're 1/10 of the investment that we're making this year in frontline policing. The facts speak for themselves. We are on course to recruit 20,000 police officers by the end of March, and at that point, there will be more frontline officers in this country than at any point in our history.
Well, in addition to that, the government says it's announced an extra £421 million to boost alcohol and drug treatment. The new funding will be given to 151 councils in England to recruit more staff, improve recovery support for prison leavers and invest in addiction treatment. Ministers say the plans could prevent nearly 1,000 drug-related deaths every year. The Undersecretary for Primary Care and Public Health, Neil O'Brien, says it will also help cut crime.
We know that drug addiction drives so much crime. It drives about half of all crime. And because we know that if people get into drug treatment, that radically reduces their likelihood that they will be out there causing chaos and causing crime. And so we're making this big investment that will mean more people in treatment, new types of treatment. And as well as being good for all the rest of us and cutting crime, of course it's a path out of terrible, terrible addiction for people who are trapped in it.
The search for a new First Minister of Scotland's underway after Nicola Sturgeon announced her unexpected decision to stand down yesterday. She plans to remain in office until her successor is elected. The SNP's Executive Committee will meet this evening to draw up a timetable for a leadership race. Possible replacements include the Deputy First Minister John Swinney and Finance Secretary Kate Forbes. Overseas now, and the UK has provided military training to 10,000 Ukrainian volunteer soldiers, with that number set to reach 30,000 by the end of this year. The Ministry of Defence has been teaching the civilian recruits a range of skills, including urban fighting, weapons handling and dealing with explosives. Dubbed Operation Interflex, the 5-week programme takes place here in the UK and is similar to the type of training undertaken by British Army Reserves. It's hoped that it'll help in the fight back against Russia's invasion. The number of people who've died following major earthquakes that struck southern Turkey and northern Syria has now surpassed 42,000. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Authority says more than 4,300 aftershocks have hit the country since the initial quakes. 11 days on, few are being rescued alive, and in some places the focus is moving away from rescue efforts and towards clearing rubble and rebuilding. Here, the energy firm Centrica, the owner of British Gas, has posted profits of £3.3 billion, more than triple what it made the year before. But British Gas actually saw profits decrease by almost 40%. It comes after Ofgem launched an urgent inquiry to investigate the company for installing prepayment meters by force in vulnerable customers' homes. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has urged the government to implement what he calls a proper windfall tax. Meanwhile, 1 in 3 small businesses might not be able to cover their energy bills from April when the price guarantee rises. It's expected to be increased by 20%. At the same time, the government will phase down its support for firms. New research by credit group Experian has found around 30% of the 1.2 million small businesses it analyses will be at heightened risk of collapse. That's all from me. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
what is going on in the case of Nicola Bulley? And frankly, have the police completely bungled this investigation now, in the process potentially throwing both her family and the public under the bus? Strong views on either side of that discussion. The family of missing Nicola Bulley have asked the public to put a stop to their speculation, instead focus on finding her. Lancashire Police, though, has come under fire for their search, and then for making the information that Nicola has had issues with alcohol and the menopause public. Let me bring you the statement first that her family released. This was a couple of hours ago. So the family have said, it's now been 3 weeks since Nikki went missing. We, as a family, believe that the public focus has become distracted from finding Nikki and more about speculation and rumours into her and Paul's private life, Paul there being the partner, of course. Although we know that Nikki would not have wanted this, there are people out there speculating and threatening to sell stories about her. This is appalling and needs to stop. Well, also this afternoon, the Independent Office for Police Conduct has said that they made contact with Lancashire Police over the information made public in a press conference yesterday. So if you're just joining us with that one, basically they said yesterday the reason why they went so big on the search initially was because there was specific vulnerabilities that Nicola had. Well, to which, obviously, people like me go, well, sorry, what does that mean? If they hadn't said that, no one would have known about it. They then come under pressure to tell people what that is, and then they go, well, she was struggling with the menopause and presumably had a drink problem, OK? And this, I think, has been regarded as many as being, well, a bit wrong, because it's thrown her reputation under the bus, possibly. If she is still out there, you would imagine, of course, that she's not particularly happy about all of this, the family as well. But also, crucially, they didn't actually share that information with the independent dive team who were looking for her. That dive team's head has come out and said it would have changed the way he searched for her had he known about this. So it's a bit of a Horlicks, really, I think, isn't it? Have the police completely messed up this whole search for the missing mum, thrown her under the bus in the process? Or is it a very, very, very tough job and you can't get everything right? Hamish Brown, MBE, joins me now. He's a retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector. Thank you very much, Hamish. Lots of strong views on this one. What's your take on this? Have the police completely cocked this up?
Well, good afternoon to you, Patrick. Well, there are a couple of issues here. Firstly, the disclosure of that information you've just mentioned just now. And thank you for putting up the family's comments. Those are very telling, where they're concerned, and I can understand why, that this inquiry is being distracted, their words. So, the police had to do something, and they've spoken to the family, said there's going to be this disclosure. And I think the family are right that there's always going to be a threat that certain information, and it gets out there, would have been sold to the media, and it would be some sort of expose or something like this. So at least the police had control of it. This decision, the police are between a rock and a hard place. That's the difficulty. Damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Well,
so
just on that, Hamish, sorry, just on that, Hamish, I can understand completely why the police and the family obviously wouldn't have wanted things getting out there about if there's a drink problem involved or hormonal issues, very personal information. But should that information have not been relayed to the independent dive team? And presumably the family would have wanted that, because the family were bang in favour of this independent dive team. They would have wanted them to have all the information at their disposal, and the head of that team has said it would have changed his search strategy had he known.
Well, all I know is that the police wanted a specific area searched, and it was on that basis the dive team went ahead and did it. I'm not sure if that would have made much difference, given her unfortunate background, but that was a decision the police made. Now, moving on to the general conduct of the investigation, I hope many people did see that press conference yesterday, which I thought personally was outstanding. The Assistant Chief Constable and the Detective Superintendent, not only did they conduct themselves with dignity, but laid out the painstaking investigation they've done. And in fact, to be fair to those who have criticised the police, and I saw some distressing news interviews yesterday, they've all said, actually, from the investigation side, they've done a pretty good job. But the police had to have a direction to go down. They've broken it down into different areas. And maybe they will think back, perhaps they gave her an impression at first, and the superintendent was very quick to put this right. They're saying it wasn't just she might have gone into the river. We did keep an open mind about the other things, but the main priority or the main aspect of this was the angle of the possibility of her going into the river, and that's where the search has been concentrated.
Yeah.
And it is from there the speculation started, and things have moved on to this unhappy situation of the disclosure. And I say the police were in a very difficult decision.
They were, but I've got to be honest with you, I find it quite annoying that the police now are blaming the public for speculation. The police throw a huge amount of resources into this. It does appear as though here is a case of a vulnerable mother of two who was dropped off the face of the earth. People are asking the police a variety of different questions. Their story, or at least their version of events, changes. There was a 10-minute window. She was wearing a Fitbit. Well, it's turned out now it might be a 2-hour window. There were no CCTV black spots. Well, there's 3, supposedly. And all of a sudden, people start to think, well, hang on a minute, of course they're going to speculate. And isn't it the police's job to try to sort that out? The communication here from the cops, I would argue, has been a lesson in how not to manage the media and the public.
Well, the media strategy, they will look at themselves and I'm sure later and say, did we get that right? But I would emphasise this is not for the police to give a running commentary on any investigation. And if you start doing that, the media will want more and more, and it can become a media circus. Of course, the media are reporting it. Of course, the public are interested, but it has gone far beyond that. The armchair detectives, all sorts of things are coming out. And bear in mind the family statement, which you've just read out, how distressing it is for this cross-information from the public coming in. It is a police investigation, and that press conference was excellent yesterday and quite clearly nailed their colours to the mast how this investigation's going.
Just finally with you, Hamish, please. I understand that you took a very keen interest in it's a completely different set of circumstances, by the way, but the Madeleine McCann disappearance, OK? And
absolutely.
With that in mind, when we get days, 3 weeks now, on from a disappearance, what does that indicate to you? What does that mean in your mind as to the likelihood of finding an individual, really?
Well, I think from the public interest, it is the connection here is the public have taken this to their hearts. There are all sorts of things which happen that they have a shelf life of about a week and then move on. This hasn't. The Madeleine McCann case, as we know, didn't either, and that went international. This probably won't. But it's one of those cases which the pub think, well, goodness me, the public think it could be my next door neighbour or it could be someone one of my family, and that's why the public have taken such an interest. But that does not excuse the armchair detectives and all the other people who are coming down, starting a rumour. That's not going to help anyone.
No, I get that. I have had an email in, though, from someone who makes a decent point, I think, which is that if they would have known that she potentially had other issues, i.e. the alcoholism stuff or the hormonal issues, which I don't particularly like talking about, especially as a bloke, really. I don't think it's a great look. But if there are these things, then people might be more inclined to do things like search their back gardens as opposed to swallowing the line that she's gone straight into the river. But we'll never know how that might have turned out now, unfortunately. Hamish, thank you very much. Hamish Brown, there, MBE, who is a retired Scotland Yard detective inspector. Look, he is raising some good points here. And I do appreciate it's easy for me to sit here and slam the police a bit and say, oh, look, they should have done this, they should have done that. I get the police are privy to information and that they have a job to do to try to protect the family. My concern is they've done the absolute worst of both worlds here, because they've not protected the family, it would appear, because now all of the dirty laundry's out there at the same time as maybe impacting the search. I've got some breaking news for you now on this story. Here we go. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Lancashire, Andrew Snowden, has just issued a statement. It says the unprecedented media and public interest in this case, whilst welcome for appeals for information, is challenging for the family and friends of Nicola and officers and police staff dealing with unsubstantiated rumours and speculation on a daily basis. I'd like to thank all members of the public who've provided helpful information to Lancashire Police. The police are being as transparent as they can be on what is an incredibly sensitive and complex case. This includes continued external support from the National Crime Agency and others as appropriate. So essentially it's quite a similar thing to what they've said in the past. Joining me now is psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Lucy, thank you so much. We had there Hamish Brown, MBE, distinguished police officer, saying that the police are doing everything they can, praising the way that they've handled this. My concern is that they've done the worst of both worlds, which is not protect the family or Nicola's reputation at the same time as not using useful information to help with the search. What's your take on this? Because if someone came out and said maybe about one of your relatives that she had a problem with alcohol and, was blaming hormones for stuff, I don't imagine it'd go down that well.
I'm extremely uncomfortable about that information coming out. From a clinical perspective, you now know something about Nicola that perhaps none of us really needed to know. I'm fully in agreement that dive teams might have needed to know that, or other members who were involved in the search. And there are certainly ways in which a police force could have encouraged members of the public to check, if they lived in the area, to check their garden shed without necessarily releasing this extra information, which is, as I say, incredibly personal. It should be medically confidential. And I was also uncomfortable about the way in which a woman having the menopause was somehow decided as being a vulnerability. Now, of course, every single woman on the planet is going to go through the menopause. Not every woman will suffer any symptoms of it, that's for sure. But the idea that somehow this is something that could be stigmatized, it's a very common thing to find that people do look down on women who are going through the menopause. It's often treated as the butt of a joke, or actually worse, it's treated as something very, very unimpressive. You hear phrases about crazy women and women in the attic, but at the same time, you still don't expect that information to necessarily be leaked to the national press, and that's my level of discomfort.
Yeah. What should they have done then, Lucy? Because I can see the argument that if they'd have done this initially, if in the first couple of days they had to have said what they've basically said, which is that, unfortunately, Nicola clearly has issues when it comes to alcohol. That's been out there. And then on top of that, she had, issues dealing with the menopause, however you want to phrase it. Maybe in the initial time that could have hampered a search, because people might have thought, based on some of the tropes that you've identified there, maybe she's taken herself off. Maybe she's, quotes unquote, lost the plot a little bit. And so people might not have got out to look for her. But then it's come out now, hasn't it, as a bit of damage limitation thing. Where do you stand on that, then? Should they just not have released that information at all, do you think?
I am completely uncomfortable with the idea that you release that into the public confidential medical information to a wider audience. As I say, I am fully across the idea that it should be given to the relevant people who are perhaps conducting the search or have been brought in to conduct an element of that search. But as a clinical person myself, boundaries are incredibly important for all parties to feel that they can trust the process. And it's very clear from statements that have been released in the last 24 hours that the family themselves are not very comfortable about this information having been released. I have to confess that when I first heard it, I assumed that the family had sanctioned this news because it is so personal and so detailed. But earlier in an investigation, there are certainly phrases that could have been used by a police force to alert the public to the fact that this was a serious case. It wasn't just necessarily about someone accidentally slipping into a river, that there might be other extenuating circumstances, without having to give this incredibly private information, which runs the risk, let's be clear, of actually stigmatizing Nicola Bulley. And that is the last thing that we want, and I'm sure it's the last thing the police intended to do.
Absolutely. Just quickly and finally, Lucy, I was actually live on air yesterday when this news broke about them revealing the nature of her quotes-unquote specific vulnerabilities. But earlier in the day was that press conference. So if the family had sat the police down before that press conference and said, OK, we sanction you now to reveal that there's issues with alcohol and the menopause, the police would have said it in that press conference, which indicates to me that it was the police's statement of specific vulnerabilities where the press have gone, which is fair enough, by the way. I'm a member of the press, and I would have done exactly the same thing. I was doing it. So, well, what are these specific vulnerabilities? Sorry, what are they? Then, presumably, the press get onto local people, maybe people who knew Nicola, and it all starts to come out. So the police have to do some kind of preemptive strike in conjunction with the family and go, all right, look, here's your headline, OK? This is what it is. With that in mind, is it the police's kind of cat-handed rhetoric here that, in your view, might have thrown Nicola's reputation under the bus?
It's very possible that simply by using that one word, vulnerabilities, which caused everyone's ears to prick up, they then had to release extra information. And it's that less than watertight communication style that I think people are uncomfortable with, that it's unfortunately led the police to have to reveal more information than perhaps they actually intended. Above all else, we just simply want... Above all else, we'd love Nicola to come home, but we'd want to know what's happened to her, and anything that helps the police do that, that's great. Unfortunately, with social media, any speculation is going to be amplified, and it's unfortunate that the police themselves appear to have exacerbated that.
Look, Lucy, thank you very much. It's Lucy Beresford there, a psychotherapist, I think just really quite nicely analysing the police's psychology of the communication and then also the fallout from it all. Thank you, Lucy. OK, right, well, look, loads of you have been getting in touch on this. I will go into the inbox shortly on this. gbviews@gbnews.uk, a lot of reaction to the way that the police have handled it. People saying, actually, look, I completely back the police. Some others are saying this has been an absolute shocker from start to finish, and people seem uncomfortable with the details regarding this particular individual. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here. And coming up, as many of us do struggle with our energy bills, one company, it's tripled its profits. And, you know, all those stories about them hammering your door down, fitting a more expensive meter without your consent. And meanwhile, there's some chap there, probably in the Caribbean, sipping a pina colada, living the high life on a yacht at your expense. And get this as well. Why are the French laughing at our military? Some say it's time to reintroduce national service. Get the UK firing on all cylinders. Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Back in a tick.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, so British gas owner Centrica reports soaring underlying annual profits of £2.8 billion, up from £392 million in 2021. But despite thousands of households, millions really, struggling with gas and electric bills, Centrica's boss, Chris O'Shea, is so far refusing to reveal whether he will waive his bonus. Joining us now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. OK, Liam, what's going on?
So Centrica's the parent company of British Gas, Patrick, and let's just have a look at the profit numbers which came out this morning as part of their company accounts. So in 2021, Centrica's operating profits were 948 million, going up to 3,300 million, 3.3 billion in 2022. Why is that? Because wholesale oil and gas prices have shot up after the war in Ukraine, which started in February 2022. And of course, Centrica drills for oil and gas in the North Sea. If you look at their underlying profits, this is the number being most widely cited, up from 392 million in 2021 to 2.8 billion, 2,800 million last year. They're a bit lower because they strip out the profits that Centrica made from selling off one of their companies called Spirit Energy. But here's the rub, and here's the numbers you aren't seeing too much of. The numbers for British Gas, which is the part of Centrica which is the customer-facing bit that actually sells us the gas and electricity via our utility bills. Profits actually fell last year from 118 million to 72 million in 2022, a 39% drop. Why is that? Because British Gas has to buy the wholesale oil and gas from other companies, not just Centrica, but others. And also, we're using less gas, Patrick, in order to economise because bills are so high. But this is really heating up now politically.
It is heating up politically because it does look incredibly tin-eared that we've got people forcing their way into people's homes, waiting for them to go out, hanging outside poor people's houses like vultures, and then going in, fitting an expensive meter. And then on top of that, you're seeing these big numbers, and you're seeing that there's some chap there, Chris O'Shea, he's not going to reveal his bonus. What do you make of that, the bonus angle on it? Should he be telling us how much money he's coining in?
Well, he'll have to reveal it when the company's accounts are published, because obviously it's a listed company. And you're referring to the fact that British Gas was using a third-party company to fit prepayment meters, sometimes against the will of lower income and vulnerable households, something that the company has said it regrets, and it's got a full internal independent investigation going. But you're right, this does look bad. Already, companies exploring in the North Sea for oil and gas, like Centrica, pay a lot of tax. So they pay a 30% corporation tax rather than 19%, which other companies pay. They pay a supplementary 10%, and then they pay another 35% on top of that. So we're getting up 60, 70% tax. And in the end, what the Tory government will say is that if you tax oil and gas companies even more, then they're just not going to bother to get oil and gas out the ground. And Centrica would say in 2020 they made a massive loss during lockdown, so it swings and roundabouts. But I completely agree. Unite, the trade union are weighing in here. Obviously, the Labour Party are weighing in. It is going to become politically very contentious. It'll be a big theme, I'd say, actually, Patrick, in the spring budget, which is on March the 15th, how we tax these companies. And if we do get extra money from them, how do we use that?
Good stuff. Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor. Well, joining me now as well is James Taylor, Director of Policy at Scope. Now, James, thank you very much. How do the people who use Scope and use your facility, they must be up in arms about all of this stuff now, because they are seeing, for want of a better phrase, really, almost mafia-style tactics where you've got people hanging around outside your house, fitting something that costs you a load of money that you don't have, trapping you in a cycle of poverty. And meanwhile, there's some bloke who's probably sitting on a yacht in the Maldives somewhere, drinking his mojito and thinking, oh, life's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's obscene that companies are continuing to make massive, astronomical profits as disabled people, households who are vulnerable, are facing devastating situations at the moment because they can't afford their energy bill and they can't afford to have the heating on, to have their fridge on, to charge equipment. It is a real dire situation that many people in this country are experiencing. And let's not forget, in April, in 2 months' time, bills are going to rise again for everybody across the country. And that's happening at the same time that the energy support scheme, the money that government has made available to households, the £400, comes to an end. So we're facing a real cliff edge in 2 months where prices and bills are going up, the support is being taken away, and we're going to see many more households, we fear, particularly disabled households, falling into fuel poverty unless the government steps in quickly.
James, I'm aware that we're a bit pressed for time, but Well, it's all very well and good, companies like British Gas saying, well, we outsourced people to kick people's front doors in and fit a meter in there. We didn't know, we regret it. I'm sorry, but it points to, frankly, quite an evil psychology. How did you think these people were getting into people's homes? How did you think your prepayment meters were going? Whose homes did you think they were going to? I'm sorry, but it's not good enough, is it? Do you think that some of these companies are evil?
I think every company, the regulator, the government, who have been saying we put customers first, we put vulnerable customers first, need to take a real hard look at themselves and consider whether they actually do. Because I think the stories that we've been hearing and what you've been saying is clearly that isn't happening. And the market is not working for vulnerable and disabled consumers at the moment.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. James Taylor there, Director of Policy at Scope. Look, there is very much another side to this, of course, which is that we don't want companies to leave and we're already taxing them to high heaven and they contribute a lot towards our economy. Yeah, I get that, but just in this current climate, it doesn't sit particularly well. Centrica's chief executive released this statement on the preliminary results of a bit of an investigation. He said, we invested £75 million in supporting our energy customers in 2022, which was greater than the £8 post-tax profit per customer earned by British Gas Energy. Whilst customers may see some relief given recent easing of prices, it remains clear that some will continue to need help and we will do what we can to support them in the year ahead. Right, OK, stay right here because we're about to get into our big debate today and it is a whopper. Should we bring back national service? It has split the inbox, GBViews at gbnews.uk. There are reports that our NATO allies believe the UK armed forces are weak and to make matters worse, get this, the French are laughing at us. That's right. Would national service fix it? Should we bring it back? Should we make people who want to come and live here do a bit of national service? And what does Nicola Sturgeon stepping down as First Minister mean now for the campaign for Scottish independence? We will reveal all very, very shortly. Now, it's the headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. The top stories this hour. The family of missing mum of two, Nicola Bulley, says the public focus has become more now about appalling speculation into her private life and less about finding her. Detectives have revealed the 45-year-old was vulnerable and that she struggled with alcohol and the menopause. Lancashire Police is facing a backlash now for disclosing such personal information about her after she disappeared almost 3 weeks ago. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has made contact with the force to determine if an inquiry is now needed. Labour say they'll recruit an extra 13,000 community police officers to tackle antisocial behaviour and violent crime if they win the next election. The Shadow Home Secretary unveiled plans for a neighbourhood policing guarantee, assigning officers and PCSOs to every community. The Home Office claimed Labour's proposed investment is a tenth of what the government is already delivering. The government's announced an extra £421 million to boost alcohol and drug treatment. The new funding will be given to 151 councils in England to recruit more staff, improve recovery support for prison leavers and invest in addiction treatment. Ministers say the plans could prevent nearly 1,000 drug-related deaths every year. The UK has now provided military training to 10,000 Ukrainian volunteer soldiers, with that number set to rise to 30,000 by the end of this year. The MOD's been teaching the civilian recruits a range of skills, including urban fighting, weapons handling and dealing with explosives. Dubbed Operation Interflex, the 5-week programme is similar to the type of training undertaken by British Army Reserves. And as you've been hearing, the energy firm Centrica, owner of British Gas, has posted profits of £3.3 billion, more than triple that it made the year before. But British Gas actually saw profits decrease by 40%. It comes after Ofgem launched an urgent inquiry to investigate the company for installing prepayment meters by force in vulnerable customers' homes. Those are the latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. We're back at 5 o'clock.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. OK, so it's understood that Paris officials have claimed that budget cuts to the UK's military are causing alarm among NATO members. The French, they're up in arms, aren't they? The news comes as renowned scrutiny has been placed on Britain's fighting capability and attitudes towards the military today. Basically, are we a proper force? Do we care about our military? Has our military gone woke? Could national service be the answer to Britain's defence problems? Joining me now is 2 GB News viewers. I wanted to get their views on this. It's Lee Harris and Susan Harris, who are not related. I think we might have done this before, but it's a remarkable turn of events. Fantastic. It's ladies first, as ever on this show, yes. Susan, what do you think about this? Should we bring back national service?
Yes. Without any thought about it at all. In fact, I've been a great advocate to bring it back for quite a long time. And when you look at the state of things today, I think now's the time to do it. I certainly wouldn't leave it to the politicians. I think you've got to get the top brass doing it. I mean, the last national serviceman was discharged in 1963. And the things that national service instill in you is the importance of the common good and social discipline, which I think is lacking in a lot of the youngsters today. They're feckless. Joining the National Army, it teaches you valuable skills. And you get 6 weeks basic training, and it teaches you trades. The 6 weeks is a brutal shock to people, which I think they need. And although I'm not a great fan of things coming over from the States, they actually have selective service, and it is compulsory to register. If you don't register, you get fined a lot of money, you get put in jail, and you don't get any access to any benefits or anything. And I think something like that would be very good now. So once they turn 18, they have to register, at that age, get them into the Army or the RAF or one of the services.
All right, Susan, I'll come back to you. Lee, your take on whether or not we should have national service. Susan thinks it would be a good thing for the feckless youth.
I think she's got a very good point. I have a bit of a nuanced approach to this. It depends on how it's structured and implemented. I'd happily support some form of optional national service, possibly similar to how France does it. But I'm open-minded. I personally, I'm not convinced making it mandatory would be the right way forward. I'd like to think that we could do a lot more to get people involved without conscription. But I actually really like your suggestion, Patrick. It's probably the best one I've heard yet, which would be to encourage, specifically encourage young people who are not in work or education to take part, especially as now their heads are likely to be full of, woke nonsense and brainwashed by lefty Marxists to hate their own country. So on balance, I think the national service would be a huge benefit to young people and the country for reasons already mentioned. But I did want to mention Finland. It seems we could learn a lot from them. I read an interesting quote from Finland's former chief of defence, and he says, yes, Finland has a very long border with Russia, but we also have a successful democracy. We have rule of law. We have a well-functioning society. So we have something to defend. And according to an annual poll conducted by the Finnish Defence Ministry, 82% of the country said they'd be prepared to participate in defending it. Can you imagine what that number would be if in the UK if we were polled?
Yeah, it's a massive problem. It's an absolutely massive problem. Kids are taught, in my view, to actually actively not love this country, to actively not love it at all. But then you look at it, we're doing a segment a bit later on, Susan, about the way that Australia has systematically managed its borders. It turned the boats back initially, and it's had a very well-organised immigration system that now means it can look at countries like us here and go, well, we've got a common language, a common culture, and if you are not happy as a doctor, as a nurse or as a teacher, you can come over here, work hard, pay into our tax system, we've got nice weather and we'll pay you well, and they're going to pinch us. Of course they are. But, Susan, do you think, are you concerned that right now we're heading towards a future where people don't like this country and wouldn't fight for it?
Exactly. I think it's a very, very dangerous situation. I blame the education system for that. Because when I was at school, we used to go to military bases and the army taught me gymnastics and everything, and it was fantastic. And I did seriously think about joining at one time. But I think that if I was PM, I would bring in this register, and I would at 18, anybody who's not in full-time work or education, I would make it mandatory that they have to go into national service. Because if they're just lazing around at 18, they'll be up to no good. We've got kids stabbing kids, and it just really turns my stomach. I think it's dreadful.
Absolutely. Susan, I don't like to talk over you normally because you talk a lot of sense, but one very quick final word from Lee here. Lee, if you were looking at a CV, I mean, you're from memory, you're in business, aren't you? If you were looking at a CV here and it said community service or national service, which one are you going to go for?
Oh, national service every single time, yeah. And in fact, actually, I'd be drawn to it because of what it teaches kids, respect and discipline.
Exactly. It's a good thing. We've got unemployment figures out there, especially young people. They just want to be on TikTok all day. Get a bit of national service on, get yourself a job. Thank you very much, both of you. Lee Harris and Susan Harris, not related as far as we're aware. Both GB News viewers. Great stuff. We have the best viewers here. What insight that was. They're better than me. They're going to take my job, I think. But there we go. Shortly, I will be launching a bid to protect our teachers, our nurses and our police officers. The Aussies want them, OK? I love the Australians. I've never met an Australian I've not liked, genuinely. But reports that they're sending delegates over to the UK now to lure 30,000 workers to the sunshine. What would make you want to go? Possibly. What about the glorious weather and the nice, chilled-out, laid-back atmosphere would make you want to go and jack it in our NHS to go and work in Australia? But I think it's an advert for turning the boats back, and I'll tell you why, OK? Because Australia's got a strong points-based immigration system. They turn the boats back and they can cherry-pick the best and the brightest from right across the world. And that is what they're going to be doing, frankly, with our teachers, with our nurses, etc. So I'll be talking all about that. But first, the departure of Nicola Sturgeon, a central figure in the independence movement for 2 decades. What does this mean now for Scottish independence? Because she's off ski, isn't she? The SNP have now begun the process of finding a new leader, but recent controversies, the gender reform bill, etc., financial issues, which we have raised at length already on this show, I'll be going back to them in the next hour, is Scottish nationalism now in decline? Joining me is Lieutenant Colonel Scott Stewart Crawford, and political commentator and former SNP member as well. Great stuff. OK, so would you have a referendum today, now, on this? Independence?
Well, I think the answer to that depends whether you want to win it or lose it. If you wanted the independence movement to lose a referendum, then today would be the time, would be the day to have it, because there's no doubt they would lose. The cause of independence has not shifted fundamentally in the last 8 years since the last referendum. And there's no indication that the public opinion is going to change in the next few years either. So if you want the independence referendum to be lost, now is the time to do it.
OK, so Sturgeon's departure, do you think that makes independence less likely? Because she was trying to bracket it and spin it as it will make... She's put a brick in the wall of independence. She's played her part. She's climbed up to her rung of the ladder. Now she's going to hand the baton over to somebody else. But actually, if she just kicked the ladder away from under her?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, it's definitely a setback for the independence movement. But I would say the independence movement has gone nowhere really at all. There's no way to bring it about. We can't get a referendum legally because Westminster won't give us the Section 30 order it requires. Using the next general election as a de facto referendum, which was another idea of the First Minister's, can't work either because it needs the agreement of the other political parties, and they'd be out of their minds if they agreed to it. And going down the road of Catalonia and having a wildcat unofficial referendum will get nowhere. It would not be legally binding and it wouldn't be constitutionally binding. And look what happened in Catalonia. So the independence movement at the moment has nowhere to go.
No, indeed. And when you look at it in that fantastic analysis that you've just given there, Nicola Sturgeon's legacy, well, Scottish independence, the thing that she, as a 16-year-old girl, went into politics to try to enact. Well, she's no closer to having achieved that, is she? And then, oh, gosh, I mean, you hate to say this about her, but you look at the education system or the healthcare system or the transport system, and realistically, was her life's work all for nothing?
Well, I think on a personal level, she has been extremely successful as a politician. But in terms of delivering what her raison d'etre and the raison d'etre of her party, the SNP, has always been about, then it has been it's a legacy of failure. I'm a great fan of the Scottish Parliament as an institution. I think it's a great thing for us to have, to be able to control over many of the issues that affect us domestically. The problem is we filled it up with the wrong people. And the people who should be in the Parliament would not now touch it with a barge pole because they fear being tainted by the mediocrity of it.
Oh, it's strong stuff. What a way to finish that particular segment. Thank you very, very much. Pleasure to talk to you here, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, political commentator and former SNP member as well. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? But we're moving on now. Now, this is a really interesting one, OK? And I've not been to Australia. I would like to go, although I must say the spiders terrify me, which is genuinely one of the main reasons why I haven't gone, which shows how pathetic I am, especially in light of the fact I've been talking a lot about whether or not people should do national service for the last 2 hours. But there we go. Anyway, we need to hide our nurses, our teachers and our police because Australians are trying to lure them down under. An Australian minister has admitted that he's come to the UK specifically on a mission to poach thousands of British workers to fill vacancies across the country. They are telling Brits very unfortunate truths, like the wages are higher, the cost of living is lower, and the weather's better. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? But joining me now is maths teacher Bobby Seagull, and he's considered moving to work in Australia. He's got colleagues who live over there. Bobby, I mean, why isn't everyone just moving to Australia?
So I'll tell you sort of my thought process. So actually, yeah, I'm a teacher now, but I used to actually work in the city, worked at Lehman Brothers, which is not a great choice as an investment bank, and at PwC as a chartered accountant. And when I worked in the city, a lot of my colleagues actually went on secondment, ostensibly for 3 months to 6 months to 12 months, but stayed there indefinitely. And when I spoke to them about why they moved, you know, the things that you mentioned, the weather, the lifestyle, the sort of amazing cities they have there. And also, it feels like it's meant to be a less crowded place than the UK. But I think, again, when I did seriously consider, would I, you know, maybe not move there permanently, but have a secondment there. I think the thing that kept me in the UK is the sort of cultural capital about why we love England. Again, the fish and chips, our pubs, watching Premier League games. So I think, again, Australia definitely offers positives. And again, I know there are some teachers, some of my friends are also considering moving abroad, not just Australia, but other places, maybe the States, South Africa, New Zealand. But
Bobby,
as a nation, we need to make sure that we're...
Bobby, if we're being honest, right, if you're going as a teacher to Australia, the only reason that Australia can now do this stuff is because they've actually protected their borders for however long, and they can cherry pick the best and the brightest from other countries that speak the same language as them, share a similar culture, and will get good, strong-minded, good people with a good work ethic like yourself to go over there and pay into their tax system from a young age. So they've done immigration right, OK? The reality is, if you walk into an inner-city school in this country, is it not an absolute nightmare to teach in there compared to how it would be somewhere in Australia?
Well, again, it can be a challenge to teach in inner-city schools. But again, I think as teachers, that's part of the joy of getting through to students that you think, they're not quite getting it, but they eventually do. And I think with Australia, of course, if you think about their immigration policy, they're definitely much tougher than we are. But their nation is, if you think about it geographically on a map, it's on an island, a huge island, as it were, quite distant from many locations. Where the UK, from France, again, the government needs to think about our policies, how we deal with France, how we do dinghies coming across. That's a separate issue. But I think Australia, I can see why teachers would be lured to working in Australia, especially in the sort of current climate now.
OK, all right. And just to say, we've got strikes coming out of our ears, and let's say something else then, right across the country at the moment, and Australia has just seen an opportunity, and fair play to them, I think, to try to lap it up. Are we going to see a mass exodus of people going down under?
So I think, again, as someone that's worked in the city, I don't think it'll be a mass exodus, but I think on the margins, yes, if people are considering the cost of living here, maybe working conditions, pay conditions, on the margins, there are people like, actually, should I go? They might think now's the right time. So hopefully we don't lose some very good teachers, doctors and public sector workers to Australia.
Bobby, thank you very much. Always an absolute pleasure, my man. Thank you. That's maths teacher Bobby Siegel there. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I've read this story this morning. I'm obviously very pro-Britain, right? It'd be weird if I wasn't, actually. I'd be probably on another news channel, wouldn't I? And I looked at it and I thought, fair play to the Australians. You know what they did? They looked as though they were going to have a massive crisis with small boats coming over. They decided to turn those small boats back. They've decided consistently to be very, very blatant about wanting to protect their borders and have a tightly controlled, points-based immigration system. And what has happened? Well, they've controlled population growth, haven't they? And with the obvious exceptions of the pandemic years, their economy has done absolutely marvellously, consistently, for a very long period of time. In fact, it's been one of the better performing economies in the world in terms of where it started and where it's got to now. And now they are in a position where they can look around at the world, at countries that share the English language, share a common culture, share a common value system, and go, well, if you're struggling a bit over there right now, what we will do is we will offer you a bit more money, OK? Probably a bit of a better lifestyle as well, definitely better weather, and you can come over here and have an adventure with us. And what they're going to do, they're going to scoop up a load of people, probably in their 30s, maybe even in the late 20s, the best and the brightest. They know they're going to have no societal trouble with them because they're basically the very same as Australians, aren't they, pretty much? And they're going to have no issues there, and they're going to go and live and start families in Australia, pay tax into that system their entire lives, and the Australian economy is going to do very, very well out of it. Meanwhile, over here, well, it's chaos. We've got an open border with the world, haven't we? Anyway, that's my hot take. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Get your views coming in. And indeed they are, actually, to be honest with you. A lot of people as well talking about national service. We're going to crack that debate wide open yet again. Do you think we should introduce national service? I've got loads more coming your way. Don't you dare go anywhere, because I will be back in just a tick.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Storm Otto, named by the Danish Weather Service, could cause some problems across parts of northern Britain on Friday morning, particularly Scotland and northern England. Here comes that storm system. Notice the isobars squeezing together. It's the winds that are likely to cause the issue, particularly through the early hours of Friday morning, and then during the morning the strongest winds will work a little further south. Back to the rest of today, and rain from that system will be moving in across Scotland. It's going to be a very wet night in western Scotland, but the rain light and patchy over northern England and Northern Ireland. Further south, most places will just stay dry and cloudy. It will turn windy here, but the strongest winds will be further north, and it's going to be a very mild night in the south, with many places staying in double figures. Let's look at those winds though, first of all, because they increase through the early hours in western Scotland and then gets very gusty all morning across Scotland down into northern England. Gust of wind of 70, perhaps in some locations 75 miles an hour, likely to cause some disruption certainly to the transport network. Planes flights may be delayed or cancelled, and there's likely to be some flying debris around and certainly difficult driving conditions, especially for high-sided vehicles on some of the Transpennine routes. Plenty of sunny spells developing, but it will be blustery. Further south, quite cloudy, most places dry, a little bit of light rain in the southwest. But it will be a very mild day here, colder further north, especially with those winds, which will ease through the afternoon, much lighter winds as we head into the weekend. Some more wet weather pushing in. That will bring some snow to parts of Scotland, chiefly over hills. Mostly rain at low levels, but could see some for a time as we head into Saturday. And then Saturday is a mixed picture, really. A bit of patchy rain on the south coast. There'll be some rain for a time over southern Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland, but tending to fizzle out through the day. Some brighter spells elsewhere. Sunday sees more rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry for England and Wales.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
It's 5 p.m. You're live with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. I've got a jam-packed hour ahead. Let's get into it. So in the last hour, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Lancashire has released a statement praising the police force for its handling of the Nicola Bulley case. It comes amidst a backlash against Lancashire Police for revealing Nicola Bulley suffered issues stemming from alcohol use while also going through the menopause, and the force wanted, they say anyway, to protect Nicola and her family, but I suspect they've ended up throwing them all, and indeed the public, under the bus. And our big debate today, well, it's all about national service. Does it need to come back? I was looking at some news recently and I thought maybe it's time that we just brought national service back. A new report has found that the UK's military is the laughingstock of the Western world. 50,000 fewer troops than the French, for goodness sake. Should we give the younger generation a bit of tough love with some military training? You know, knock the woke out of them. Anyway, and is it fishermen or fisher them? You heard. Singer Sam Smith has come out and said it's the latter. It's a fisher them. It's fisher them. You can't even say it. Smith, who uses the pronouns they, them, was on the BBC's One Show this week talking about how he loves fishing and said that he would be a fisher them, not fisherman, a fisher them. Has he lost the plot? Yeah, I mean, this is the last couple of weeks alone. He's dressed up as the devil. He's got a video where it looks like people are urinating on him, and now he's talking about fishing and the fact that he would be a fisher-them. Oh, I got stuck into that in the last hour. I can't even keep up. Join me, Patrick Christys, right here for the next hour. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Should we bring back national service? I'd like to see Sam Smith do a bit of national service, actually. Now it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The family of the missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, says the public focus seems now more about appalling speculation into her private life than actually finding her. Yesterday, detectives revealed the 45-year-old was vulnerable and that she'd struggled with alcohol and the menopause. Now, Lancashire Police is facing a backlash for disclosing such personal information about Nicola, who disappeared almost 3 weeks ago. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has made contact with the force to determine if an inquiry is needed. Labour say they'll recruit an extra 13,000 community police officers to tackle antisocial behaviour and violent crime if they win the next election. The Shadow Home Secretary unveiled plans for a neighbourhood policing guarantee, which would assign officers and PCSOs to every community. Yvette Cooper's criticising the Conservatives for having a hands-off approach to community policing.
So I want to talk today about what's been a complete collapse in Home Office leadership on crime and policing under the Conservatives, how they've stood back while neighbourhood policing has crumbled, while the charge rate has plummeted, while confidence in policing and the criminal justice system have fallen, while more victims are being let down and more criminals are getting off.
Well, in response, the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, says the Conservatives are already investing more funds than Labour is promising.
Well, Labour's plans aren't credible. In fact, they're 1/10 of the investment that we're making this year in frontline policing. The facts speak for themselves. We are on course to recruit 20,000 police officers by the end of March, and at that point, there will be more frontline officers in this country than at any point in our history.
Several terror plots were foiled at the last minute in 2022, according to the police, which they called close calls, with some being goal line saves. The head of counter-terrorism policing said the would-be attackers had picked targets and were gathering weapons when officers intervened. Currently, there are more than 800 live investigations, and police have seen a rise in calls to their anti-terrorism hotline in the last year. The police watchdog is reopening its probe into whether forces failed to properly investigate serial rapist David Carrick. The former Met Police officer has admitted 85 serious offences against women over a 17-year period. He was jailed for 30 years last week in Bedfordshire, Sussex, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire, and Met Police. The forces had previously reviewed themselves and found no failures. The watchdog will now decide if investigating officers were influenced by Carrick's status as a serving police constable. The UK has provided military training to 10,000 Ukrainian volunteer soldiers, with that number set to reach 30,000 by the end of this year. The Ministry of Defence has been teaching civilian recruits a range of skills, including urban fighting, weapons handling and dealing with explosives. Dubbed Operation Interflex, the 5-week programme takes place here in the UK and is similar to the type of training undertaken by British Army Reserves. It's hoped that the basic training will support the fight back against Russia's invasion. Now, the number of people who've died following major earthquakes that struck southern Turkey and northern Syria now stands at more than 42,000. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Authority says more than 4,300 aftershocks have hit the country since the initial quakes. 11 days on, few survivors are being rescued, and in some places the focus is moving away from finding trapped people and towards the recovery of bodies, clearing rubble and rebuilding. Here, energy firm Centrica, the owner of British Gas, has posted profits of £3.3 billion. That's triple the amount it made the year before. But British Gas, however, saw profits decrease by almost 40%. That comes after Ofgem launched an urgent inquiry to investigate the company for installing prepayment meters by force in vulnerable customers' homes. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has urged the government to implement what he calls a proper windfall tax. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
OK, well, we're going to start this hour, actually, with some breaking news. So, within the last few moments, the Royal College of Nursing has announced a significant escalation in the strike action. Great, here we go. More than 120 NHS employees in England in the increasingly bitter dispute over pay and staffing. The college, which accused the UK government of refusing to engage in negotiations, also said it will increase financial support for its members who lose wages by taking industrial action. So they're going to pay members... reading between the lines here, or just reading it, actually. They're going to pay their members for strike action. There we go, that's nice, isn't it? Incentivising them. The next strike will run continuously for 48 hours from 6 a.m. on March the 1st. So we'll give you more on that one, but I think it is fascinating because they say that there's been refusal to negotiate, but there has been a negotiation and there has been a pay offer put on the table. And I would imagine that the issue of nurses' pensions isn't up for debate either, is it? I bet that's not on the negotiating table. They get a whopping great big pension that would bring the average salary up to around 64 grand. So, yes, there we go. Well, we'll give you more on that as and when we get it. Are you all a bit sick of the strikes now? I certainly am. More breaking news, more strikes. Can I just say quickly on this one, actually? So it's a continuous 48-hour period from the 6 a.m. on March the 1st. You can forget now about the idea that they do not want to harm patient safety, because that's what this is now. They're not getting what they want. They thought they'd kick up a fuss and get what they want, and now here we are. And they go, all right, 2 days off completely then. 2 days off completely. Then it'll be 3. Then it'll be a week. And people are dying. People are missing appointments. Chemotherapy is not being administered for some people during these strikes. And I'm sorry, but gone are the things about, this is all about patient safety. It's not. It's about money in your pocket, and people are dying. Anyway, moving on. Lancashire Police and Crime Commissioner has said that the police is being as transparent as they can be after they shared sensitive information about Nicola Bulley's struggle with alcohol and the menopause. So, the family of the mum of two have urged the public to move their focus onto finding Nicola, but the police have been blasted by the public, and indeed the media, for their approach to this search. They lashed back at armchair detectives for speculating about the disappearance, but I think the reality is, if you're asking me anyway, that the police threw the public under the bus yesterday by saying that, oh, we can't, you've been giving us all duff information. You've been calling for information about one of the most widespread missing persons cases that the country's seen in recent years. And then now, I would argue, maybe they've thrown Nicola and her family under the bus by their cack-handed way of revealing that essentially she had a drink problem and she wasn't dealing with the menopause well. Joining me now is Deputy Leader of UKIP, is Rebecca Jane, who has been critical of this police search. What's got you? Because people are saying, me being one of them, it appears as though they may well have thrown her and her family and the public under the bus here.
Well, they well and truly did yesterday, didn't they? They called a whole press conference to defend themselves, and it was nothing about Nicola. I think that the whole policing matter and the investigation has been an absolute shambles from start to where we are today. You know, it took them 7 days to cordon off the scene. It took them 9 days to release images of the day that she went missing. From the minute that this happened, they had a theory in their head and then they worked themselves around it. They didn't keep themselves open, and they didn't even potentially look at this possibly being a criminal case, which it still may be. There are a lot of, obviously, options and what could have actually happened to Nicola. But the problem is the police. They say that they've been transparent. They absolutely haven't. If they were being transparent, what they should have done yesterday when they called their press conference was put their hands up and say, do you know what? We've made a few mistakes here. We're going to invite another force in to look again and see if there's anything else that we have missed. They didn't. All they did was bless the public, and later on in the day, they threw Nicola under the bus.
And if people are just new to this, then the reality is that the police said, OK, Nicola had some specific vulnerabilities, OK? So then the press and people, everyone at home watching that will have gone, sorry, what's this? That was new information. And then as a result of that, they've now had to come out and go, well, actually, those specific vulnerabilities were things to do with alcoholism and things to do with the menopause. And then they criticised the press and the public for speculating on it, but they've just decided to drop that in, haven't they? And do you think it looks like the police really trying to cover their own backs here?
Of course they are, absolutely. You know, they did two things yesterday, and I don't think it was intentional. I think they slipped themselves up when they said that she's high risk and she's vulnerable. And then obviously people are like, what do you mean she's high risk and she's vulnerable? You've never said this before. So of course people are going to ask questions. What will be happening in the future is that universities, for media, PR, publicity, and the police will be using this as an example of what not to do. Because throughout the whole of this, in every single press conference, they've let themselves down, and especially in the investigation as well.
And this is the other thing, it bleeds through to the investigation, because it's amazing now. It's all very well and good saying, well, they didn't share the information with people like you and me and the public, and I can understand that. But at least share it with the independent dive team, and the head of that dive team has come out and said, if we had known that she had these vulnerabilities, that there was an element to this case about potentially alcohol involved, potentially some emotional distress involved, it would have changed the way they looked for her. And yet again, another vital period in the hunt for missing Nicola went missing.
Absolutely. And there's another point, isn't there? They didn't want Peter and his team involved. They only did it because of the public pressure. And what they should have been doing is, and obviously they've chastised the public at every single opportunity they've had, they should have been saying, thank you for your support, thank you for your interest, we're going to do whatever it takes. They didn't. They weren't interested in doing that. And their latest stunt now is their victim blaming. Who on earth needs to know that she liked a glass of wine? I've said it on Twitter today. If I go missing, please don't use the fact that I like a glass of wine against me. This is absolutely deplorable. Poor Nicola, her memory, her children, her family have been put through enough. And for the police to do this to them as well, absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, no, we've gone to Lancashire Police. We've put all of this to them. So we've put exactly this to them, the kind of questions that I'm asking you now. And we've been talking about it throughout the course of the show. They are yet to get back to us. We will obviously change... Well, we'll let people know if they do get back to us, and we'll tell people what they've said. But, yeah, I mean, it is quite disturbing, I think, isn't it? And just as a wider point, Rebecca, faith in the police force, generally, nationally, I think after a variety of different incidents, grooming gang scandals, etc., is pretty low. And do you think this has done anything to enhance the reputation of our police force and the faith that the public should have in them?
No, I think it's absolutely damaged them, unbelievably so. And that comes as somebody who is a Lancashire resident. The local police force are my police force. I am very concerned for the people of our county. But it's not just that, it has national repercussions, you know. And then obviously we see in the news bulletin, they're recruiting 20,000 officers this year. Well, good luck to you after this episode. You won't got people to work for you. This is appalling.
Rebecca, thank you very much, as ever. Rebecca Jane there, who's the Deputy Leader of UKIP. And look, people in the inbox have been getting in touch about this all day. Very split, actually, very split. People saying, well, look, the police are trying to do their best. And I'm sure, quite well-meaning, trying to do their best, don't get me wrong. But you should also point out inconsistencies. Let's just remind ourselves it was 7 or 8 days before there was a press conference into this. Police officers, been very critical about them not securing a search scene. The bench was still there, not cordoned off, people walking through an area. They're not revealing to the dive team the specific vulnerabilities about Nicola. Them telling us, oh, well, she was wearing a Fitbit. Well, that implied that they kind of knew some quite vital information potentially about her movements. It turns out that wasn't synced. Oh, there's only one CCTV black spot, which turns out there's 3 CCTV black spots. And then on top of that as well, of course, they're saying, oh, we're absolutely certain that she's gone into the river at this particular point. Well, they're not now. That's turned out to not necessarily be the case. So a lot of inconsistencies here. And also this afternoon, the Independent Office for Public Police Conduct, I should say, has said that they've made contact with Lancashire Police now over information that was made public in that press conference about Nicola Bulley's private life. And Charlie Hedges is a retired missing persons detective with 36 years' experience. He joins me now. Charlie, what's your take on this? Every single day for me, this just seems to be hinting at a little bit more incompetence. Am I being unfair?
It's one of the difficulties. We don't know all of the information. We're sitting on the outside, looking in, making judgments. Clearly, the whole case needs to be reviewed in the fullness of time to establish exactly what has gone on, what's been done correctly and what has been done incorrectly. And it is quite difficult at this stage until we know the full details. There's lots of speculation about what may or may not have been done. So I think we just need to bear that in mind.
Can I ask Charlie, if I'm just going to put one of my emails directly to you, if that's all right, because we had a lady get in touch with me who said if she'd have known that Nicola was struggling from, say, alcoholism or drink issues and potential hormonal issues as well, they would have been more inclined to have checked things like their garden sheds or checked a little bit of woodland at the back of their house or things like that. But they didn't do it because they were going off what the police are saying, which is basically she's in the river. Should the police have actually, to flip it on its head, come out and said this stuff earlier?
By not revealing it now, there's a lot of criticism. Yes, one could argue they should have done it sooner. It was very unusual to release that amount of information. I think what I've consistently said throughout all the various interviews I've done, yes, the river was the most likely place and the most obvious place to start the inquiry, but it's essential to keep an open mind and look at all other possibilities. And we know that missing people don't go missing without a reason. They're an indicator of something in their life, and those things need to be looked at thoroughly and understood to then lead the investigation forward.
The police try and cover their own backs a lot, don't they, Charlie? You've obviously been a missing person detective, 36 years experience there, and the police, from the outsider looking in, appear to me now to be trying to deflect, and they're saying, well, the public are giving us a load of misinformation. We've got these amateur sleuths, they're making our lives miserable. I'm sorry, but you must have that with pretty much every well-publicised missing persons event, and Twitter exists. So what do you want people to do about that? And then they're saying, well, actually, she's got all these other issues as well. I can just smell a little whiff of the police here thinking, oh, we better get our house in order here. Let's start passing the blame.
Well, I think what we've seen is an unprecedented amount of speculation about what's going on. With the advent of social media over the last few years, that there's been much more inclination for the public to voice opinions around this. The downside for the police is that every one of those needs to be investigated to see whether they're valid or not. And also, just talking about that sort of the speculation, wherever it comes from, it's incredibly difficult for the family. Let's not forget about those who are left behind, her partner and her children and everyone who knows her. They're going through the most traumatic and difficult situation, suffering this, what we call ambiguous loss. They don't know what's happening, and there are all these rumours being circulated. And I think that's a really important point to bear in mind for to care for the family.
Just finally on this particular one now, in your decades of experience in missing persons cases, if somebody wants to go missing, is it quite easy for them to do that or not?
There's a lot more opportunity for tracing people now with digital footprints and what have you. It's not impossible. And if you take the right steps and don't use media, you don't use your card, etc., then you can disappear, but it's not so easy these days as it has been in the past.
Look, Charlie, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Charlie Hedges there, former detective, Thames Valley Police, and a missing persons expert as well. Loads of you getting in touch on your thoughts of the police handling of the Nicola Bulley case, and I'm not surprised. Graham says there should be actual sackings. If it was a private company, heads would have rolled, but because the police are publicly funded, it's as though they get away with being a complete shambles, and it's not on any longer. It is a tough one, this. I've been critical of the police now, and mainly because I just think I can see the lack of media training that it appears to have had, and the fact that now mistakes that have been made in the rhetoric that they put out, I can see have led the family into a situation where they've had to reveal very deeply personal circumstances around Nicola that clearly they did not want to reveal early doors. I'm also critical of them fundamentally because as yet they haven't found Nicola, and they appear to be quite reluctant to the idea that there was a private dive team there and they didn't share that information with them. Can you imagine if a member of your family had gone missing, there's a private search team there, and the police did not share vital information with them, and that the person in charge of that private search says, if I'd have known this, it would have changed the way I'd searched for your missing loved one, I'd be absolutely raging. Daniel says, I think the police have handled this case incredibly badly from the start. Now that her personal life has been explicitly exposed by the police, I just hope that if she is alive, that she doesn't do anything out of embarrassment and guilt. This is the other side to it. Everyone's clearly hoping that Nicola's alive and well and that she's found. And, you know, now you're seeing stuff about her reputation being put out there when it comes to alcohol and when it comes to hormonal stuff as well. And we had a guest on earlier on about this, actually. I mean, it would be an incredibly grim situation for you to find out that people have been saying all of this about you. And I just want to point out as well, the police said that she has specific vulnerabilities. So the press, everyone really gets hold of that and goes, what is it? And so then the press will start digging around. They will already have contacts with people that know Nicola and people in the area. And so then stuff starts coming out as a result of that, as a result of what the police say. And so then they have to try and preempt any nasty stories and say, right, look, here you go, here's your headline. And yes, again, I will say, I do think it's the police who've potentially caused that situation. Jan says, I feel so sorry for her children, whatever they must be going through, hearing their mum's vulnerabilities and medical problems made so public. Surely Nicola should be entitled to some confidentiality and dignity. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, Sam Smith, that's right, would love to be a fisherman. Not a fisherman, not a fisherwoman, a fisherman. The singer made the comments on BBC's The One show earlier this week, and I will put it to a woman who's an extremely successful fisherman. I've got all of that coming your way and much, much more. We've been having a chat about national service as well, and I, for one, would quite like to see Sam Smith do a bit of it. I'll be back in a tick.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
OK, Captain Birdseye, Captain Ahab, famous fishermen in their own right, fishermen in their own right. But that's not what Sam Smith would say. Now, it's all gone a bit weird with Sam Smith, if you ask me, We had him crying in his house during lockdown, saying he just couldn't cope in his multi-million-pound pad. We've also had him dressed up as a devil. We've had all sorts recently, haven't we? But here's the latest round of, some would argue, nuttery. He said that he would be a famous fisher-them. That's right. So Smith, whose recent hits, they include a performance in a satanic costume and a dress-up as a honey roast Sam, has caused controversy for reluctance to say fisherman on the One Show this week. Let's have a listen to this, shall we?
You're a big fan of fishing.
I do love fishing, yes, I do.
What?
Yeah, I'd love to be a fisher-them.
What, like a fly fisherman?
I'd be any type of fisher-them.
OK, can we just play? Can I play that again? Is that all right? Just one more time. So he's asked quite innocently, would be a fisherman, and he says this. Go on, play again.
You're a big fan of fishing.
I do love fishing, yes, I do.
What?
Yeah, I'd love to be a fisher-them.
What, like a fly fisherman?
I'd be any type of fisher-them.
Fisher-them, OK. Well, with me now is fisherman. It's Ashley Mullinger. And Ashley, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, as people will be able to see, of course, you are a woman. Now, I understand that you are quite in favour of Sam Smith. What did you make of him wanting to be a fisher-them?
Well, we're kind of in the same boat, pardon the pun, because my pronouns, she, her, but I say fisherman, and that is out of just respect for the majority of men that have built the catching sector up. It's a legacy thing and a part of a historic community I'm proud to be a part of. So are we not in a similar situation in the fact that he would rather say that he was a fisher then? Sorry, I've said he, I meant they.
Well, there's no, welcome to the minefield that I have given up on trying to deal with every single day now, and I just charge straight through it until, I don't know, something terrible inevitably happens to me. But, so you have gone for yourself as a fisherman, and that's more out of convention, is it? You don't see that as a particularly gendered language?
I don't, and if I'm completely honest, you could call me a marine life extraction operative. I love my job. I really do not care what I'm called.
I love that. I think this is brilliant because, job titles are great, like Director of People and Places, which is basically just like a council leader. But so what is particularly rewarding, by the way, about being a fisherman?
The freedom. The fact that your day is so unpredictable. Nothing's ever guaranteed. There are so many different stresses, different challenges that are put in front of you. You're working in nature in its rawest environment. It's a real honest job. You're only going to get out what you put in. So many different things.
I mean, so I'm assuming that you would be perfectly happy to take Sam Smith fishing with you and show him the benefits
if any of their people are watching, Sam Smith has an invitation.
OK, so Sam Smith, I'll get Sam Smith's people to talk to your people and we can sort out a celebrity fishing excursion, exactly. But can I ask you, the idea of Sam Smith saying he wants to be a fisher-them, OK, are women in the fishing industry stigmatised by gender at all? I mean, is there a massive outcry at the idea of it being fisherman and not fisherwoman?
To be honest, there aren't many women that are working in the catching sector. But that said, when I first started commercially fishing 4 to 5 years ago, I knew of 2 or 3 of us. Now there's around 17, 18. So women are accepted. And I mean, I recently won the award of Fisherman of the Year. I don't know how, but yeah.
Well, so hang on a minute. So you mean to tell me that you have the opposite of the Brits or whatever, where men are now winning women's awards. You mean to look me in the eye and tell me you've taken a man's award? Is that right?
Essentially, yes, but supported by men in the industry. And also, I mean, I was talking to one of your researchers, and I was thinking about it. We have this gender pay gap in a lot of roles. But in the fishing industry, it's you're paid via a share. So a man and a woman's role, you're going to get paid the exact same regardless. There's more equality in the fishing sector than I think people are realising, and recruitment's such a massive issue because it's not the most accessible of jobs. And I just think that women are perhaps thinking it's not a job I can do, but it absolutely is.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, you've sold fishing, and congratulations on your award. And I don't think there'll be a massive outcry from men everywhere that you've, in a way, pinched their award. But look, thank you very much. That is, of course, Ashley Mullinger there, who is a fisherman. Fisherman, fisher person.
Thank you.
Fisherman, yeah, whatever. There we go. Good stuff. Take care. All right, OK. I can anyone else. The reason I wanted to do that is because I nearly spat my coffee out when I had to watch it back like 3 or 4 times with Sam Smith, the Fisher Them thing. I just thought, you know, it's getting a bit ridiculous now, isn't it? In the last couple of weeks with Sam Smith, we've had him dressing up as Satan on the stage. We've had a music video released which does appear to have people essentially pretending to urinate on him, which we can all agree is odd. He's decided to mock himself up as some kind of honey roast ham, and yeah, he's dressed as an alien. I forgot about the alien. You know, it looks like what people think was inside the thing they shot down over America, doesn't it? There he is. Look at him. And then on top of that, now he wants to be a fish of them. So there we go. I mean, look at that's honey roast Sam there, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Right. Well, I'm actually genuinely concerned for him. Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, should we bring back national service? Can I just say, looking at those pictures of Sam Smith, I think the answer is a resounding yes. OK, it's a valid argument if you believe that the French, who believe the UK's armed forces are so weak, they boast around having 50,000 more military personnel than us. Forget about the woke generation. Forget about sorting people like Sam Smith out. We cannot have the French laughing at us about our military capabilities. And I think I might have discovered the real reason, the truth behind Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. I think there could be a massive scandal brewing. Find out what I think it is very, very shortly. Don't go anywhere.
Patrick, thank you. And the headlines this hour. The Royal College of Nursing says it'll reduce England's NHS services to an absolute minimum when new strike action takes place next month. More than 120 NHS employers will be affected on March the 1st, with staff walking out for 48 hours. Previous strikes lasted for just 12 hours. They say they'll also include staff working in previously exempted departments, including emergency and intensive care. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, is calling the action a significant escalation, but says the government is working on contingency plans with NHS England. Sir Keir Starmer has made a surprise visit to Ukraine and met with President Zelensky. The Labour leader pledged that support for Kyiv will continue if his party comes to power. Sir Keir also visited Irpin, where he was shown evidence of alleged atrocities committed by Russian troops. During the trip, he called for Russia to face justice in The Hague. The family of missing mum of 2, Nicola Bulley, says the public focus has become more about appalling speculation into her private life and less about finding her. Detectives have revealed the 45-year-old was vulnerable and said she'd been struggling with alcohol and the menopause. The Independent Office for Police Conduct has made contact with the force to determine if an inquiry is now needed. Labour says they'll recruit an extra 13,000 community police officers to tackle antisocial behaviour and violent crime if they win the next election. The Shadow Home Secretary unveiled plans for a neighbourhood policing guarantee, assigning officers and PCSOs to every community. The Home Office claim Labour's proposed investment is a tenth of what the government is currently delivering. And the energy firm Centrica, owner of British Gas, has posted profits of £3.3 billion. That's more than triple the profits it made last year. But British Gas actually saw profits decrease by almost 40%. It comes after Ofgem launched an urgent inquiry to investigate the company for installing prepayment meters by force in vulnerable customers' homes. Those are your latest news headlines. We're back at the top of the hour. See you then.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Fast-paced end to this show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going in on Nicola Sturgeon to begin with, though. She was under a lot of internal pressure in the days leading up to her resignation as her gender reform bill sparked backlash, but her financial handling has also come into question, and she doesn't like it when people talk about it. So the party's financial dealings have come under a lot of scrutiny, especially over a loan made to their accounts by Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Morell, who also happens to be the SNP's chief executive. With me now, with all the latest on the stuff that Nicola Sturgeon doesn't like to talk about or other people talking about, is Olivia Rutley, GB News' political reporter. And, you know, out of respect for Nicola Sturgeon not wanting us to talk about this, what's going on?
So, essentially, the crux of the problem is a missing, it seems, £667,000 donation to the SNP. It was a fundraiser that was made during the independence referendum, raised £6,500.
50,000 pounds. It's a good job.
Sorry.
It's a good job. It's not a GCSE maths exam, this, isn't it? Because you and I would both be absolutely screwed. But carry on. Go on.
Yeah. £57,000 of that was spent on independence campaigning during the referendum, but the rest of it, all of which was ring-fenced by the donors to be spent on independence, seems to have disappeared into the ether. Now, that was a question 4 or 5 years ago, but it came under proper scrutiny when it emerged that a couple of years ago, the SNP only had £100,000 in its bank account. So it was clear that the SNP was going through financial difficulty, which made it all the more interesting, if you like, that this £500,000 or so had gone missing. Now, to add fuel to the fire, Peter Morrell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, the CEO of the SNP, lent his own party £107,000 of his own money on an interest-free loan, which, to put it mildly, is pretty unusual. Nicola Sturgeon said that she had no knowledge or couldn't remember the details.
And that's obviously, you know, absolutely fair enough. I mean, who would know that their partner, or have any recollection whatsoever, that the person that they are married to has decided to give £100,000 of their money to a party that you are leading? I mean, no, carry on, carry on.
Well, she has tried not to discuss this and has tended to close down questions on it in press conferences. Now, the question yesterday, which she closed down, was about this missing money, this £500,000 missing money, which is now the under an actual ongoing police investigation. So one of the donors who contributed to this pot went to the police in 2021, and the police did launch an investigation, but he's now gone back to the police to complain that the investigation has been taking too long. So it looks as though it might all be coming to a head in this police investigation, sort of under the surface. But Nicola Sturgeon is very keen, well, seemingly very keen not to talk about it, although she would argue that, as she did yesterday, that she never talks about ongoing police investigations.
Well, no, which is convenient, given the fact that there is one and it does involve, it would seem, her and her party and her husband and some money. So, Olivia, thank you very, very much. Olivia Rutley there, GBNews' political reporter. Well, there we go. So Sturgeon's departure has happened, is happening, she's resigned. So what next now for the SNP and their fight for an independent Scotland? With me now is Michelle Ballantyne, former leader of Reform UK Scotland. Michelle, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Is independence just dead in the water? Nicola Sturgeon's life's work, her ambition, oh gosh, you hate to see it.
Yeah, I mean, she's had a life's work that's gone absolutely nowhere. So, I mean, she was actually very much the sort of organiser of the 2014 referendum, which she lost. And then she took over as leader, supposedly to carry that mantle forward and make a difference. And despite all their claims over the years that they were making progress, that they were nearly there, that we're going to have another referendum, it's not happened. Really, nothing up here has moved. If you had a referendum today, it would be no to breaking up the UK. So I suppose the question is, has she wasted her time? Now, a lot of us would say, actually, she's done a lot of damage. You know, she went straight back to wanting another referendum after the last one. But more importantly, her supposed focus on Scotland has left us with more problems. We've got an education system that's deteriorated. We've got a health system that's deteriorated. We've got a leader who, yes, we describe as formidable because of her management of everything she does when she's interacting, and that communication that belittles those in front of her and takes control of the situation. Yeah. But actually, if you cut underneath that, things in Scotland have got worse under her. And you know that when you ask SNP members what they've achieved, and the answer is the baby box.
Well, Michelle, there is a potentially tried and tested political tactic of getting out before it hits the fan, to use a colloquial term there. And if maybe she feels now as though things are going to come home to roost, so independence, she'd have to have some kind of Catalonia-style referendum, which I think most people would turn their nose up at, frankly. And then on top of that, the education system, she alluded to it. She's saying that the attainment gap is small. Well, it's not. The attainment gap, apparently, in Scottish education is as bad as it's ever been. Drug debt is still absolutely rampant. There's potholes everywhere. I was talking to a guest on that yesterday. The health system's shocking. There's a huge percentage more people having to go private. Is there an argument to say that Nicola Sturgeon has actually made Scotland worse, not better, then?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Scotland used to be one of the world-leading centres for education. I mean, I know when we came back with our small children as they were at the time, one of the arguments my husband made is, I want to go back to Scotland because the education is so good. You couldn't say that now, and you certainly wouldn't come to live here for the education. And I think that's a terrible statement of affairs. when she made it her #1 priority. Judge me
You
on
could go there.
education.
You could go there for the landscape as well, though. Although apparently Nicola Sturgeon was desperate to try to put wind farms across it. So there we are. Michelle, thank you very much. Short and sweet, but good nonetheless. Michelle Ballantyne there, former leader of Reform UK Scotland. Now, this has been the big one that we've been talking about for most of the show, actually, which is about national service. So could bringing back national service be the answer to Britain's domestic and defence problems? With the International Institute for Strategic Studies, which is still very difficult for me to say, finding that the British Army has 50,000 fewer troops than the French. The French are laughing at us. Apparently the Americans are laughing at us as well, supposedly. Is Britain drifting when it comes to our military? And I'm concerned about the young woke brigade. You could call them the woke brigade, couldn't you? And I think maybe they need to have the woke whipped out of them. Potentially a bit of national service is the best way to go. Joining me now is Phil Campion, former SAS soldier. Now, Phil, I understand, it looks very moody where you are. I understand that you do not think that we should bring back national service.
No, I don't think it's the greatest idea on earth. I'll tell you for why. Look, listen, firstly, can I just say that if we're going to listen to the French, they've in no position to talk about anybody. They're the back of the queue for everything, unless it's being liberated. They are well out of turn. They are well out of turn with what they're saying here, all right, OK? So, you know, I'm not interested in them. What I am interested in is we have a lot of youth who I don't think would necessarily benefit by going into the army per se. That said, some sort of system where they were disciplined, learnt about teamwork and got some skills in the bank would be a good idea. Now, if a portion of them were sided off and decided that they would volunteer for the British Army, then that wouldn't be a drama. You know what I mean? I think that press ganging people, it doesn't work. You know, volunteer soldiers always perform better than press ganged men. And I think, as a whole, yes, we do need some sort of thing to stop this wokeness in kids nowadays. You know what I mean? We really do need to get a grip of it because the schools aren't doing it. They leave school lacking all sorts of social skills that they should have and picking up all sorts of things they shouldn't have, as far as I'm concerned. So, look, listen, the immediate solution is not to just slap them in the army. The immediate solution is to get some sort of scheme up and running whereby, you know, they can pick up these skills.
Phil, you could take your pick, couldn't you? You could go to any inner-city London comp. I mean, one of them was actually shown footage of pupils burning the Union flag there. That's how much they have in terms of national pride, for goodness sake. They are more likely in schools, I think, to have the rainbow flag than they are the Union flag. That's a problem. I wonder about, you know, young offenders institutes or people who are on the verge of criminality. Could it be a good thing, do you think, to try to give them at least a crash course? I'm not saying send them to the front line, but do something to say to them, look, you've got to get up in the morning, here's some discipline, here's some order, and they might actually enjoy it as well and become more productive citizens.
I absolutely agree with that to the bottom line. It's in my DNA. I would absolutely love to be disciplining some of these young people. And to be fair, a lot of them would turn into very good soldiers. These inner cities prove a great breeding ground for some of the best soldiers we have, OK? But like I say, just to pick it up as an armed forces venture, I don't think that's fair. I think this is a venture that we need to pick upon as a whole country. You know, we can call it national service, but it doesn't necessarily have to be army-led.
Yeah, it's a really good shout, that, actually, some form of national service. And, Phil, just quickly before I let you get going, I was reminded, Phil, of a time that you tried to whip me into shape a little bit, actually, when it came to the military. And, I mean, it ended up with just this idiot, i.e. me, walking around firing a gun. And, yeah, exactly, I was... and we were very nearly arrested, actually, Phil, because someone called the police because they saw me driving around with a gun, didn't they? Which I suspect is the way that national service would go. Our viewers on television will be able to be... Yes, Phil, I take it that you don't think I would be a good candidate for national service, then, no?
I think there's nothing that a decent haircut and a bit of drill and discipline has taught you right out, son. Do you know what I mean?
Fantastic. Phil, good point to leave it on. Phil Campion there, former SAS soldier. And, yes, the video of me being kidnapped by Big Phil and, well, he would say interrogated, I would say tortured, is available online. Moving on. Our nurses, teachers and police, they're under threat. A certain sunny nation on the other side of the globe is trying to pinch our workers, tempting them away with the promise of golden beaches and better pay. I mean, it's a hard sell, isn't it? An Australian minister has admitted that the plans to steal Brits to fill vacancies in their workforce actually do exist, but will they succeed in their mission? Joining me now is Dr. Shirin Lakhani, doctor and aesthetic physician who's previously considered moving away to practice. So, look, why haven't you gone to Australia? I mean, better pay, better working conditions, and, you know, the weather's nice.
Well, to be fair, the reason I didn't go was because it'd be too far away from my family. But when I was a junior doctor, it is something I considered. And many of my friends have moved to Australia and are practicing there currently. So the Australians trying to get UK doctors over isn't a new thing. It's been going on for years.
In Australia, because... you know, this is what I need to know. I mean, at the minute, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm getting a lot of emails in saying, given what's been going on at the picket lines, they're saying, good riddance, I'll put you on a flight to Australia. Is that unfair?
Yeah, I think it is unfair because the reason our health service are on the picket lines is because of the working conditions in the UK. And you and I have talked about this before as well, that the working conditions are bad, the pay's not great. The morale is really low. So, I mean, that's why they've gone on strike. So if they are getting better opportunities elsewhere and they're in a position to go, then why wouldn't they?
OK, all right. But would you urge British doctors, nurses, whatever, to stay here and actually try and fight for the NHS that they seem to care about, or just go down under?
Well, it'd be nice if they could get somewhere with the government to try and improve the working conditions in the NHS. At the end of the day, we all came into medicine to make a difference. But when you're working in a situation where there is no morale, you're getting bashed at every corner and you can't seem to make a difference to anyone, then what are the alternatives?
Make a difference to Australians. Instead, I mean, like I said, it's a hard sell, isn't it? More money, easier working conditions and better weather. But there we go. Look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, Dr. Shirin Lakhani there, doctor, aesthetic physician. And, yes, good stuff. Look, for me, this is just an advert for why we need to secure our borders. What do the Australians do? Well, they turn the boats back. They've had a rigid points-based immigration system for quite a long time now. Their economy has flourished in recent years, if you take out the COVID stuff. And now they can look at countries where we have a shared language and a shared culture, and they go, right, well, we want the best and the brightest from your public services, and we're in a position to pay you more, and you don't have to deal with a lot of the rubbish that you will get over here. And this is an advert for what you can do if you control your borders, frankly, and have a points-based immigration system. I mean, it's staring us in the face and we're losing people to it. Joining me now is Michelle Dewberry, because she comes your way next for Jubes & Co. Michelle, yeah, I mean, initially, I just think good on the Australians, to be honest with you. They are highlighting the fact that, well, if you do turn boats back and secure your own borders, you can go around the world and get the best and the brightest.
When are we heading off there?
Tomorrow.
I mean, I've got to say, it does sound pretty attractive, doesn't it? I was thinking about it earlier on when I was listening to one of the interviews from one of the chaps that's coming over to do his jobs fair next week, and I was thinking, actually, yeah, you're selling it pretty well to me, quite frankly. I wouldn't mind. No, exactly that. I just think the answer is staring us in the face, and we're going to lose people. But it will be a big test, won't it, for them to go, oh, all those people on the picket lines. I care so much about patient safety. Well, we've just found out nurses are going to have 2 days off. They're doing 2 days in a row to try and cause maximum harm to the people who are in the wards, etc., aren't they? And then all of a sudden they'll just lob it off to Australia. I know. Well, I want to get into this nurses' strike in a couple of minutes, actually, because I had the misfortune, actually, of having a baby in intensive care. So when I hear that actually people will down tools on intensive care wards, it fills me with dread, Patrick. So I'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes as well. But aside from that, though, yeah, the Australian thing, I was listening a little bit thinking, let's go.
Let's go, yeah, but the spiders put me off, though. The spiders put me off. That's the reason why I won't be going to Australia, despite the
spiders?
Yeah, have you seen the size of them? Like dinner plates. Anyway, Michelle, we've got to go, apparently. I'm getting shouted at.
Show me the size.
Oh, OK, sorry. I've got some breaking news for you. Lancashire Police have now referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct over the contact the force had with missing mother Nicola Bulley on January the 10th, prior to her disappearance. So there we go. Lancashire Police referring themselves to the watchdog. OK, look, more on GB News on that throughout the course of the evening. Thank you very much, everybody who's been tuning in. I'll be back again from 3 p.m. tomorrow. Michelle Dewberry will be up next, and no doubt we will have the latest on that breaking news about Lancashire Police. See you in a bit.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Storm Otto, named by the Danish Weather Service, could cause some problems across parts of northern Britain on Friday morning, particularly Scotland and northern England. Here comes that storm system. Notice the isobars squeezing together. It's the winds that are likely to cause the issue, particularly through the early hours of Friday morning, and then during the morning the strongest winds will work a little further south. Back to the rest of today, and rain from that system will be moving in across Scotland. It's going to be a very wet night in western Scotland, but the rain light and patchy over northern England and Northern Ireland. Further south, most places will just stay dry and cloudy. It will turn windy here, but the strongest winds will be further north, and it's going to be a very mild night in the south, with many places staying in double figures. Let's look at those winds though, first of all, because they increase through the early hours in western Scotland and then gets very gusty all morning across Scotland down into northern England. Gust of wind of 70, perhaps in some locations 75 miles an hour, likely to cause some disruption, certainly to the transport network. Planes flights may be delayed or cancelled, and there's likely to be some flying debris around, and certainly difficult driving conditions, especially for high-sided vehicles on some of the Transpennine routes. Plenty of sunny spells developing, but it will be blustery. Further south, quite cloudy, most places dry, a little bit of light rain in the southwest. But it will be a very mild day here, colder further north, especially with those winds, which will ease through the afternoon. Much lighter winds as we head into the weekend. Some more wet weather pushing in. That will bring some snow to parts of Scotland, chiefly over hills. Mostly rain at low levels, but could see some for a time as we head into Saturday. Then Saturday is a mixed picture, really. A bit of patchy rain on the south coast. There'll be some rain for a time over southern Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland, but tending to fizzle out through the day. Some brighter spells elsewhere. Sunday sees more rain coming into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, mostly dry for England and Wales.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes & Co, the show that I like to call Britain's best debate programme. Did you see the news that was just released that the nurses will now be going on strike for 48 hours in March? But get this is where it's different, because now they'll be downing tools in A&E, intensive care units and cancer wards. Are you a nurse? Do you sit there? Just help me